I'm gonna start just to let attention.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I've got meeting control.
Not yet.
It's a little confusing.
Okay.
Here, I'll get that to you before I start.
That's right. Need two yeses, yeah.
Here. Delete. Hi, everyone. We are just waiting for a minute to try to reach quorum and take attendance.
You have to speak up.
We're waiting to run through attendance real quick, but we will begin our proceedings in just a moment. Unless we have quorum already, which would be amazing. We almost have quorum. Todd is 6, Charles is 7. And then Marissa, it's 8 for quorum. With our new. Or is 7, is it 7? The new roster is the.
Is Kimberly still in this? Is Kimberly on this one?
Yeah,
I don't want to ask any questions.
It's 8.
it's 8. Yes, we are
Jason.
waiting. Once Michael gets here, then we will have quorum. But I think that we can begin the meeting. Welcome to the January 27th meeting of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee of Community Board 5. I am Libby Hutton. I am the interim chair of this committee. First, I'd like to go around the room and have all of our committee members introduce ourselves, beginning with in person, and then we will move to online. Starting.
John Harris.
Annie Rowland.
Murnal Vikram.
Michael Kabak.
And online.
I'm Isabel Marks.
Shapiro.
I'm Charles Nye.
What do we do it for them?
Catherine is here, so I think she had just attained quorum.
You can, Charles.
2, 3, 4.
I am in the building, so I'll be right in.
We have reached quorum, so we are
Take the elevator.
good to go. All right, so we have 2 items on the agenda tonight. First, we will be hearing from a report from Urban Space, having a discussion with FDNY, representative from Parks Department about the 2 fires that took place at the holiday markets at Herald Square and at Bryant Park. And then second, we will be hearing from Bryant Park Corporation about the new operator for the concession in Bryant Park. It is very exciting. We have Dan Biederman here, and so we will go ahead with that. Thank you all for being here. And with that, I will let Urban Space take it away.
You want us to come up or?
Yeah, I was told that you had a presentation, like a,
No, just a written presentation.
okay, that's totally fine.
After the thing.
You can just from where you are is probably fine.
Okay, my name is Eldon Scott and I'm the president of Urban Space, and with me is Evan Shelton, vice president of Urban Space. So we wrote a presentation, a quick statement, and then we're happy to discuss, beyond that, what's going on. So the fires this season were preventable and unacceptable risk for the holiday markets. As frightening as they were, we're glad they were contained. And we had a real life experience, better understanding where the risk exists in the markets. Our job now is to fix it, which is, it is very fixable, and we'll get into that. Since we got the markets down, for the last few weeks, we've been spending a lot of time with fire safety and construction professionals and consultants to understand best practices. And thankfully, there are a lot of steps that can be taken. So there's 2 primary things that we have to work on. The first is training, which is the first line of defense to make sure that no fire occurs in the first place. That's mostly staff, understanding what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to use equipment. And the second is booth design to prevent spread if there ever were a fire again. So we're creating internal SOPs, which essentially mirror the different New York agency SOPs. With our own SOPs layered on as to enforcement thereof. So the
What's
best,
an SOP?
what?
What is an S?
Oh, standard operating procedure. The best way to prevent a fire in the first place is to have trained staff with appropriate equipment. Our SOPs will require one on our team and someone in each booth. If it's any kind of food preparation, carry the appropriate New York City safety certificates at all times. These certificates are the H-25, which is a restaurant permit, the food handler's permit, and the F-05 certificate of fitness, which is a fire department permit. We have already, we're engaged a restaurant consultant to perform additional training for our vendors and our general managers. Essentially, the general managers and all the people in the booths have to understand the use of this equipment and what the risks are and how to appropriately use it. The consultant that we've hired will also conduct spot inspections throughout the duration of the market, as well as helping us make sure that the general managers that we hire have the right level of experience and training. So at all times during the markets, when we're in operation, we'll have a GM or an AGM with fire training on site. And part of their job will be to perform at least 2 inspections per day per booth to look for any unsafe conditions. And they're authorized and will be told to shut the booth down immediately if they're not meeting any of these conditions. In addition, we will have separate from our electrical company, our contractor, we'll have a licensed electrician who will conduct spot checks of the electrical installations just to make sure all the plugs and equipment is appropriate. There's no heat being emitted. So that's sort of in a nutshell, the operational side. So the second thing is booth design. Should a fire occur again, we need to be able to contain the fire in a single booth so it can be put out quickly. With the help from the consultants we've been discussing, we've been sourcing new and testing new materials, which we'll use to encase the inside of the booth that has any kind of heat producing elements in it. These can be installed to create a barrier between booths to contain spread. So that'll be a 1 or 2 hour rated material. So as we come up with specifications, we'll be talking to the 2 engineers about that to make sure it all works, and we're testing that on site. Although not required under the food handler's permit, our consultant already advises to have a fire blanket in each booth, which is sometimes easier, more practical to use. Sometimes the fire extinguishers are quite heavy, and not everyone can use them as effectively as other people. So we're gonna have fire blankets plus the appropriate fire extinguisher, which should be mounted according to the regulations. And these things will be checked daily by our AGM or our GM to make sure that they're there and that they're charged, et cetera. And finally, we're this year using a restaurant design professional. I've actually used these people before. I've built a lot of kitchens indoors. So we're very familiar what the indoor standards are for these kind of things. So we're going to use probably the same consultant we've used for our indoor assemblies. So what their job is to get a submittal from each vendor, look at the equipment, approve the equipment, look at the types of connections that they have, make sure there's not long extension cords, et cetera, and make sure that it's safe. And they'll, obviously be very aware of any risk that the equipment might bring. So once we're this is early, because it's only been really 3 or 4 weeks since we've actually been able to take a breath, but we're glad to be here early and get some feedback. So, but what we'll do is once we've really developed, we've tested these materials and we've finalized all these SOPs, we'll be talking to, I'm sure, fire department and our landlords to approve and make sure that all the standards are put in place. And we're, the final statement is that we're thrilled that we are able to manage some of the most well-visited markets in New York City. And I think our new mission is to make the safest markets in the world, which I think we can do. So that's all I have in terms of prepared remarks. But if anyone wants to talk about any of the specific pieces of it.
I also was hoping that we could, thank you for that. Wanted to give a chance to have a conversation to bring in, our FDNY folks too. And Sandra, if you wanna chime in here too, if you have more to say.
Good evening, everyone. That presentation was very thorough. I'm joined here by Battalion Chief Castellano, Joseph Castellano. He had to call in, so I asking him to speak specifically. But it's always, what I will say about what the owners just shared, that it is a collaborative effort, and it is clear that they are doing their best and putting measures in place to make sure that the space, the customers that are coming in, the neighbors in which they're in remain safe. So I wanted to say that I applaud him for those efforts, and we will certainly join hands with him to make sure that those efforts are realized as relates to the fire department and inspections. BC Castellano, you can take it away from here.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can, thank you.
Okay, all right, great. So yeah, I was actually at both of those fires. I responded to both of them. The good news is they were accidental, right? There wasn't some firebug out there looking to target, holiday markets, because I think that was initially a concern. They were both ruled to be accidental, for two different reasons, but accidental nonetheless. I'm glad to hear that there is a different plan in place for future markets, an ounce of prevention, pound of cure type of thing. These things are a little challenging for us just because they do pop up and they're not in our normal, we don't see them and then they're there, right? I mean, so access is always an issue. The Bryant Park one is obviously in the center of Bryant Park. That's a little more of a fixed kind of area. The other one is, like a pedestrian plaza in Broadway. But if you had a specific question, I think next year and going forward, I talked with some of the fire prevention folks. There's going to be a different approach to these types of things. We had issued, the Fire Prevention Bureau had issued permits for Bryant Park. It was for this ice skating rink, right? That had a public assembly permit, and it had propane for the Zamboni. It was on shore power. It was on like Con Ed line power, the kiosks. So that was really, we didn't touch any of that stuff. And the one in Broadway, we had a permit out for a generator, right? There was propane used there. That was not part of the plan. That was not, that was actually, part of the big hazard at that fire. We did have one fail, and those can be very dangerous, And that night, actually, the one on Broadway was very windy. And as you guys see, I mean, it wasn't like a conflagration, but the wind was pushing in the fire, in kind of the wrong direction for the kiosk. It was pushing them into the kiosk. So from what I saw, the fire started at one end and the wind was pushing it into the rest of them. So that was a bit of a problem. So going forward, I think the plan is going to be, I talked to the fire prevention folks, like I said, and when the Parks Department, gets a request or an application for something along those lines, the plan is for it to trigger like a joint inspection between, the various agencies. If we're involved, if it's DOT, if it's on a street, Parks Department, DOB, more of a collaborative approach to address things before they happen. And I'm glad to hear, like I said, that they definitely look, these things are kitchens basically, right? And when you have a kitchen, there's a lot of rules that have to be followed. And those rules are there for reasons, right? And now when we see what it is, you know. So if you had a specific question, I could probably try and answer it or give you my best guess.
Okay. I was wondering if we could review, just so everyone's got like the facts of sort of like exactly what happened and like which pieces of it were accidental. And so, Myrtle, I know you've done a bunch
Yes.
of research.
Yeah, so the Broadway one was the first one, right? You know, that happened overnight, about 4 in the morning, I think it was. That one was ruled accidental electrical, right? And I wasn't the first chief there, I was the second chief there, but it was well involved when I got there. And like I said, we found numerous propane somewhere inside the kiosks. And that's all unacceptable. And there was numerous space heaters there. Those were all had propane tanks in them too. So one of them did fail after the fire. We heard the boom. One of them had basically failed, which is basically it got overheated, and the side of the cylinder, the 20-pound cylinder propane tank, failed, and there's a hole in it. So obviously, if that's dangerous, that can become a projectile, you know. And that one is probably damage-wise, that was a bigger area because it was. I'm not sure about, you know, a delayed acknowledgement of the fire, but it was overnight. So you don't have people walking around seeing things. So that one fire had, and the wind was definitely a factor there. So the other one was in the middle of the day, right in Bryant Park, and that one was determined to be accidental but cooking related, right? I think there was. I know I saw some of there was security footage. Bryant Park is obviously more of a fixed, you know, establishment. They have security footage there, and you could see. I see the guy inside was trying to do something about it, but you know, he gave it the college try, but he bailed out like head first out the kiosk to save himself when he realized he wasn't putting it out. You know, so I don't know. It didn't seem like they had the appropriate extinguishers. They had no extinguishing system on there. Again, I think these things might have slid, you know, through the cracks, but that's not going to happen anymore. You know, they're basically knocked together sheds with no fire resistant rating, no extinguishing capabilities, and they have basically commercial kitchens in them. So, you know, that's going to have to be addressed. You know, when you have a commercial kitchen, you know, there's a lot of rules that apply, inspections and extinguishing systems, and you know, that's going to be on the radar from, you know, moving forward.
Okay.
The Bryant Park one was tough because it was in the middle of, you know, Bryant Park, and, you know, just getting in there, getting access, getting a hose line in there takes time. And we got there pretty much in the nick of time because the flames were getting close. If you saw, there was some damage to the like the tent structure over the ice skating rink.
Yeah, to the rank.
And,
What we read.
yeah, it was close. That stuff would have just melted away, and it might have dripped down and caused a fire inside of the tent. Because that was the adjacent behind that kiosk that burnt was, it looked like the ice skating rental side of things. So it had some storage and stuff in there. You know, that could have been a problem. But gladfully, you know, no one really got hurt. And, you know, that was always the major concern.
Okay. I'm going to hand it over to Myrtle, who has done more
Could you
research.
speak a little louder?
Sorry, I'm going to hand it over to Myrtle, who's done like a more of a deep dive on some of this research.
Sure, I mean,
Just
it's,
to follow up.
to
on
be,
some of
to
these
be honest,
things.
thank you so much, everyone, for being here. To be honest, there wasn't a lot of information available online. I mean, I was looking for what, you know, if I could find information on what went on, what did not go on, but I just have a question. So Urban Space, you guys have been organizing the holiday market. Was this the first year that you organized the holiday market in both the spots?
No, the
You've been doing
first
this
year at Harold, but many years for.
many years
Yeah, the
for
other
Bryant
markets.
Park, and
Yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff that you mentioned seems sort of, I mean, quite frankly, commonsensical to me. I mean, there's a reason why it hasn't been implemented yet, and now that we've had a fire, we were looking at implementing them.
I think we were implementing these, and now we're just gonna make sure there's inspections twice a day. To make sure that the person in the booth has the right experience, just doubling down on those.
Has the right equipment, which it seems like they did not have, right?
It-
We do,
It just seems a little, I'm like a little confused, and maybe the fire department can sort of like clarify as far as like what is allowed and what's not, and what types of inspections have to happen, and like how coordinated it
Like,
is.
what
It seems like
goes
they
into-
weren't clear
yeah.
that it was a commercial kitchen that's happening, when a lot of what's lovely about the holiday markets like is the food and like the treats. So I think I'm just sort of confused on sort of how this was overlooked in the process.
Yeah, I think historically the inspections have been focused around health. So at this point, we're gonna have to double down on training for all of the staff within the booths, making sure that obviously the health is a high level of standard, but also the fire training is there as well. So, that's where we're talking the certificate of fitness from the fire department. It's an actual certificate as opposed to just, obtaining an H-25, which is a food service establishment.
But this, the FDNY permit that was issued for both places, I assume. Did I understand that correctly, that there was a fire department permit that was issued or no?
So at Harold, we had a fire department permit for our generator.
The generator?
Yeah.
Okay, and that
So
does
they
not,
inspect the generator and make sure that, it's up to code and that the size of the engines and the diesel, fuel hold cells, are how they're supposed to be.
okay,
But that was, that's that permit.
so
It's
that
just
does
for the
not,
generator.
so that does not involve inspection of the wiring, which in this case caused the fire.
Yeah, no, not on the. booth
And it
level.
does not involve checking to see if people have fire extinguishers at hand in case something goes
It did
goes
not.
wrong. Okay,
Um,
that's a little concerning,
yeah,
right?
the wiring, I guess I'm a little confused why this wasn't.
And didn't you say that the fire was caused by the failure of a propane tank?
No, it was a failure of electrical fire,
It,
The one at Macy's?
correct?
yeah, the first one, there was a
Did you say
propane
anything
tank
about a propane
that,
tank?
he'd said that, Michael, it was there was a propane tank that could have been a projectile if it was part of the fire
said
and that had, yes.
Yeah, what,
yeah.
so the fire marshal determined that fire to be accidental electrical. So the propane did not cause the fire, but it was involved because it was illegally stored. It was involved in the fire area. So the flame impinged on the propane tank, causing it to fail. The propane was never inspected, wasn't supposed to be there. That was never part of, the fire department, like he said, had only issued permits for the generator. And so we were not aware of the propane being there, because we did not approve that at all.
Is it true that, that you guys had accessing a fire hydrant at Bryant Park or Herald Square, one of those?
Well, I mean, it's not like that's not anybody's fault. It's just a function of, the fire hydrants are fixed objects, right? And now, you have they're on the streets, right? Fire hydrants there might be one inside Bryant Park. I really don't know, but when it comes to something that's a little off of the road, then it becomes we call it a longer hose stretch, right? So that just takes a little more time. That one, thankfully, was in the middle of the day, so things move fast. We got a line in place quickly, but access, as a general rule, anything where you're shutting down streets and holiday time with a lot of people on access is always an issue for us. And in the Broadway is so chopped up now, you can't travel down Broadway. So I'm not sure. You have to correct me, but is that a permanent pedestrian plaza? Was it 3.5 to 3.6? So that we never drive down there. If that's the case, I'm not sure if that's always closed or was only closed for the holiday market. But at that point, we were stretching. We were, using the hydrants that were off of the northern end and the southern end. So I'm pretty sure that was 3.5 and 3.6 Street.
So I just have a question on sort of like logistics to take over like chair privilege here with questions. But so when it gets inspected, and I know that you said there was a permit of assembly for the skating rink. These are very high trafficked areas, which is like much of the success of the park. Is there no sort of like practice run of the fire department to like track how many, like how in the case of a fire, like you would put it out or how you would access it in advance,
fire
even
drill?
though it's like an ongoing, essentially like an ongoing pop-up building for a month? Is that just not a permitting or practice situation that gets run? I know that there's like drills that fire departments run for various structures.
Right. So, so the permits issued by the fire prevention side of things, where I'm on the operational side, right? You call 911 and you got to look at me. So it's kind of two different things, but you just can't do a physical drill at every public assembly permit that's issued. You know what I mean? It's Bryant Park is a fixture. We know it's there. We know there's always something going on there. you know, 12 months out of the year, right? When the rink's down, there's stuff going on there. When the rink's up, there's stuff going on there. There's always stuff going on there. Access to a fire in there is like I said, it's always challenging. But when you have all those plywood and 2x4 structures, that's now we have a little different fire potential inside the area.
Okay, I'm just wondering
I'm not
if
sure if anybody. Go ahead, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, I don't know if anyone, I mean, like I said, going forward, this is going to be scrutinized, obviously, a lot more by our fire prevention folks. But I don't know if I don't think they had, is there anybody there who has a fire guard certificate? I mean, it's a very easy, certificate to obtain. It's not anything too elaborate, but it's basically, the long and short of it is it's basically someone who's responsible to call the fire department if something happens, and you basically keep an eye on things. I don't know if that's part of, I'm sure we'll be going forward, but it probably wasn't part of, the organization having a fire guard on scene. I know I did run into the security guard for the Broadway one. We were maybe a half hour into the operation. I would assume he had a fire guard cert, but I'm not positive on that. But that does help. Early notification to the fire department. That's common sense. We get there faster. The prop's smaller.
Well, and just to add to that, I believe the fire guard certificate is the F4 certificate that I'm talking about. So even the vendors that are still at Bryant Park to this day have now all obtained an F4 certificate for the duration of the event. And then moving forward into next year, it will be a requirement before the season begins, as well as with our staff.
Okay, I'm just wondering if going forward, it might make sense for the fire department to run, because there are so many events in Bryant Park, if it might make sense for there to be, if that would be something that is practical, to have some sort of like access point training for some of these plazas that are in our district, because we have several of them that do events where there's really large gatherings of people, that some sort of sense so that it's not the first time of firefighters arriving on the scene. When there's just so many people there, I think is that something that would be workable in sort of a prevention or operational side?
I think if we can get notification, like, in a timely fashion prior to something starting, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we could, try and make that happen. Knowing if things are changing there, and maybe next year will be a good year to do it, because, we're going to be more on top of things, because things are changing. Now we expect a little more out of the people that are, running the show over there. So I don't think that's, too much to ask.
Okay.
Yeah, same from our side. We're happy to meet with them for the season.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it more as like, so that anyone who is in like the neighboring fire departments can, if that's even possible. But Marnell, do you have additional, I think there's a couple of additional questions to kind of get.
Not very many more. I mean, just one, what are the typical crowd control procedures like for, and this is more because I mean, we're lucky that in Herald Square it was a 4 a.m. fire, and Bryant Park it was sold relatively early during a workday. But so what are sort of the typical crowd control, and this is probably more for the FDNY, procedures that you would like to follow in case of fire?
Is that directed at me? So a crowd control, you mean, like when there's a fire there?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you broke up.
Evacuation of, because these are
well, yeah. So I mean, when we respond to a fire, obviously our first, we're there for life and property, right? And life comes first. So immediately, our first response is for life. So we are evacuating the immediate area that's affected, right? And I was there, I ran that fire. We immediately, and even before I got there, there was units there before I got there. They had already been inside of the skating rink and talked to, they had good staff there. I talked to the electrician, squared away guy. They had good people there. That's our first concern, is evacuating and getting people out of the area, right? It's not really something where in a public area like that, you can't really do a head count, right? Because people aren't staying around once you evacuate them. But we evacuate them, and in conjunction with that, we're attempting to, mitigate the fire, right? So we do both at the same time. That's kind of how, our response patterns go for every type of emergency. We're doing two things at once at least. So we do address evacuations. Once we isolated it to the kiosks, then the evacuation, we're pretty dialed in on the small area. Once we cleared the skating rink and we knew we didn't have a problem in there, if you saw the video, the first hose line that was in place, they did a great job because they not only putting the fire out, but they sprayed down the top of that skating rink canopy as well. So if that was, smoldering or it's still warm, that limited that problem, and then they refocused the line back on the kiosk, and we kind of dialed in on what the immediate problem was for the kiosk. So evacuations are basically, we address the concern, we address the situation we respond to, right? I just can't give you a blanket statement, but that is definitely one of our first concerns.
Myrna, do you have additional?
No, but in terms of the design of the place, is there stuff that can be done better that would help with the evacuation in case of an emergency?
Well, in terms of on people who are running it.
Yes, in terms of the design of the holiday markets.
I would say having staff available to evacuate the building. I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? I mean, I don't think that should be anything new. If there's an emergency, I mean, like every Class C office building has to have a whole evacuation plan, file with the city, a fire plan, right? File with the city, and that could be something that if they don't have one already, they should have an evacuation plan in place for any sort of emergency, not just a fire.
This is Craddock, Dan Biederman, Bryant Park. You may have seen this year on the north side of the park, we never expected the park to be this popular and crowded. So this year, to the greatest extent we've ever had on the north side, there was a different pattern that allowed people to circulate much better. It was not nearly as crowded on the north as it was in the south. And the aim of the staff, and Irene Vianos is here, who runs the Winter Village, Katie Solomon, Vice President for Operations, Mark Bodwin, Vice President for Construction. The aim is to do the same thing on the south side to the greatest extent possible, so there won't be this crush of people. And then obviously it's a good idea to have some kind of evacuation plan if there is something that happens during the day. Obviously, we weren't entirely prepared for this. We've run this operation for 20 years, never had a fire before.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we had.
But there were two in Herald Square, I guess that would have been a little bit of a heads up.
Okay, additional questions. Catherine.
Yeah, my comment is pretty much that I think that we've heard enough here to move forward with maybe further meetings with maybe somebody being designated so that we can have an ongoing view and update of the progress, and that we as a committee should be, lighting the resolution that calls for ongoing review of this process because it involves interagencies. It's FDNY, it's DOT, but we're taking a public space perspective. And I think we could ask a lot of questions here tonight, but I think it's better served to resolve that we're going to be talking about this in an ongoing way, whatever that means. And that, if board members want to ask other questions, certainly, but the crowd control issue, we've got everybody here in the room committed to working through and coming through with a plan, but I don't think there's anything we could say here tonight that could, other than ask questions, that could, but we want to have like a clear reporting on the record for CB5. That, the only other question I would say is that Urban Space does run a lot of public space programming in our district. And so that we would welcome an ongoing conversation with you all about other spaces, about this kind of futuristic work, that something happened here that signals for us to move forward in a different way.
Other questions from, thank you, Catherine. Other questions from the committee? John?
Yes, just sort of a technical question, was anybody officially, cited for infraction of the fire code or related laws and regulations? And if so, who? And, what were the penalties involved? If not, why?
Subject to the fire department.
Yes, I think.
So, yeah. You're looking for if there was violations, issued, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Was anyone formally cited, like, receive a
You know, I
citation?
don't have, I talked to, the fire prevention folks. They did not mention anything about violations issued. I have to get back to you on that one. I don't wanna talk out of school. I'm not sure about that, actually. I know what permits we issued, and I know reality, so there might have been something about that propane. I know we confiscated propane tanks on Broadway. We probably, at least like 5 or 6 of them, we confiscated, maybe more. So, you know, we have if there's propane illegally stored, you know, we usually ask for the vendor to come respond. They have an authorized vehicle to transport. You know, in the middle of the night, that's not happening. So then the fire department has a vehicle that is used to transport, you know, the propane cylinders to an authorized. We have a yard where we put it, you know, an outside yard. So there may have been something issued for the propane, but I can't say with any certainty.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but if the chair.
Yeah.
Follow up on that.
Yeah, if we could follow up on
And actually get it in writing.
any citations and whether or not, yeah. I think that this is very much gonna be an ongoing process. And we would love to have you back. Okay, more questions. Charles?
Good evening. Hi, it's Charles Knight here. My question is for the FDNY. I just want to say thank you for all the hard work you guys do. I just wanted to know, you mentioned something earlier, and I didn't quite get it, but I just wanted to know when there is pedestrian plazas and any plans for future pedestrianization. I know our community board has spoken about pedestrianizing big, large lengths of Broadway. How does that impact your department in addressing fires and getting to fires? And do you feel that when plans like that happen, they should, the people who want these plans should at least have dialogue with the FDNY?
I'm not sure that doesn't happen. You want to get that, Sandra?
I do. So we work diligently. So if it's a pedestrian plaza, this is an ongoing conversation with DOT. This is not I think pedestrian plazas is not unique to just Community Board 5. So it's an ongoing conversation that we have with DOT to see what that looks like. Particularly with public, with public safety agencies such as our own, and we sit at the table prior to them being installed and seeing what works or doesn't.
Thank you. Todd?
Hi, everybody. This is Todd Shapiro. This is for our friends from the fire department. In your estimation, your professional opinion, do you feel like the current rules and regulations that are in place are adequate for these winter village type kiosks and crowded situations? Do you think that it's a question of people breaking the rules, increased enforcement, or the rules not really being suitable for this type of situation? You know, just generally, what's your opinion on those issues?
No opinions, just facts. We have seen pop-up shops operate for decades. And, unfortunately, this year there were 2 in a short period and amount of time. What I can say the beauty of emergency management is that we are constantly learning and constantly growing. So we take everything, though it being an unfortunate that a fire did take place, we immediately examine and see what we can do better and how we can do better enforcement, how we can better prepare those that are being staffed here. And we're having this conversation. So I think that we are in a wonderful place, and I can only hope that by winter season next year, we will not only be better informed, but better protected as well.
Okay, I'm gonna, before I put it, do you have a question?
Comment, question?
Comments, we're gonna go to next when we go to
I just have
discussion.
one question.
Okay, one more question from Bruno.
Last one. I did read that the Open Space guys had launched a GoFundMe website for the businesses impacted by the fire. Are you guys not required to take out insurance to help?
But there was
with any of that
insurance
stuff?
also.
There
Yeah.
was, okay.
I do have a question.
Okay, Michael, do you have a question? One more
Yeah,
question.
are there plans for for doing again in front of Macy's? Is that gonna happen again next year?
We would hope so, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions of the public or comments from the public rather, before bringing this into a business session for the committee to discuss what actions we want to take. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this matter of the fires at holiday markets?
Just Todd.
All right, seeing no members of the public wanting to speak on this, I will bring this into discussion for the committee. Does the committee feel, how are we feeling about this, and is there an action that we want to take as in an ongoing way?
I know.
Michael K.
okay.
Yes.
All right, so I just want to go over what I think I heard here, make sure I got it all straight. You know, I hang out a lot at Bryant Park. And I've seen it, I love it, and I've seen it at its really crowded time. If you want to make haste, you don't walk through Bryant Park a month before Christmas. You ain't getting through. So we're really, 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 really lucky that that wasn't a boom explosion in Bryant Park, and it was just some guy tried to put it out, and everybody saw it and cleared away. That's what happened. They cleared when they saw the fire. The myriad of people moved away, and so they got away. So, and for a fire procedural, in case of fire, go this way, that way, and the other way, I don't know if that would make any sense. Number one. Number two, in the future, there's going to be 2 times a day an inspection. And I'm picturing over 100 booths. How many booths do we have in the park?
Well, there are about 180, but
100, almost
40 of them serve food, and many of those don't cook, so it'll be a limited number. What about 25?
But the inspections are gonna be for all of them, right? For electric, because outside you got the wires and the paths that are covered over.
I don't think so.
Different inspection for the electrical wires.
That's one step.
So there's an outside inspection and there's an inside inspection of only the foods,
They're cooking.
only the cooking?
Somebody's selling donuts.
Okay, so there's 2 kinds of inspection. You're gonna have some guy going around and inspecting 40 food places
We will.
2 times a day? All right, I'm gonna ask his name and I'm gonna check him out once it starts, okay?
Sure.
Would that be okay? Would you mind that? Okay, and where I can find him and how I can get in touch with him. You say there's gonna be a licensed electrician? Who's also gonna check everything at the beginning or gonna be there all the time or?
We're just gonna have an outside electrician just to check all the electrical connections and extension, make sure there are long extension cords that are legal, et cetera.
Continually, because there's a lot of electric there, right, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay, and as far as the booth design goes, I can picture, now I'm guessing that the booths are the same booths every year, you just disassemble them, store them, bring them back, am I right?
Yes.
So the walls for them are wood, plywood, you said, and are the plants like to line them with some kind of a aluminum sheet metal or not aluminum, but some kind of cheap?
Yes.
Is
A
that the,
different, a
Fire
fireproof
rated
material.
material, yep.
Michael, we're in comments, not questions. right
yeah, but
now,
I,
just
but when I had a
discussion.
question before, you said. I didn't know if it was a question or a comment, so you can you give me permission to, I've been waiting,
Okay, okay.
writing down stuff,
Yeah,
so I shouldn't
Just,
forget.
yeah, we're trying to wrap it up so we can move into like a.
But this is important
action plan.
stuff,
Yes, oh, it's very important. Yes, that's why we have everybody
so
here
I can
together.
wrap it up.
Just to keep it really to the point, because we have additional items tonight too.
What was I on, booth design?
You were in booth design and you were on fireproof materials and you
Okay.
were reviewing
So,
the
so
different
the
pieces of it.
booths, the walls for the booths, the ceilings for the, and the floors for the booths that are now wood. When we look at them next year, maybe, they'll be lined with some kind of fire preventative material, whether it's a cooking place or not, or just cooking places.
Cooking places.
Only the 40 cooking places. Okay,
Is it 40 or fewer?
It's fewer.
It's roughly 40.
Fewer than 40.
beverage, much
Okay.
fewer.
I just. Fire blankets. Case booth inspections, course of. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop now.
Okay, are there additional comments? I think that,
Okay.
so here's, yeah, a little bit of a summary of what we've heard, I think is good. Do you wanna lead us in a summary? This is my vice chair, Michael Southworth, who has been
So-
taking very diligent notes.
So, my notes of what I've heard are basically for next year. Under fire safety and certification, will be mandatory FO4 certificates. That vendors must obtain and have the fire guard certificate, there'll be on-site fire guard. And be present at all times. There's also an assumption that, security personnel probably have had that, but will, explicitly require it in the future. FDNY has requested as early notification as possible, and we had discussed the openness to fire drills or some type of rehearsal, et cetera.
Training.
Yeah, and this leads into staff training and oversight, where there'll be training improvements, both of the GMs, staff and equipment, fire safety and standard operating procedures. A dedicated restaurant consultant will provide additional guidance to ensure proper usage of cooking equipment and adhere to safety regulations. And at all times, a GM or manager with fire training will be on duty. There'll be frequent spot check in terms of inspection and enforcement. There'll be frequent spot checks, 2 inspections per day per booth with cooking. And any failing to meet safety requirements will be shut down until compliance is reached. There'll be a licensed electrician that will perform separate checks of electrical installations and ensure safe setup. There'll be permit compliance, certificate of fitness, FDNY permits must be clearly displayed and up to date. Generators, like the one in Harold Square, will also require FDNY permits. Booth design and equipment, fire containment, improved booth construction using 1 or 2 hour fire rated materials to help contain a booth. Contain a fire within a booth, if it occurs. Fire blankets and extinguishers, that's very straightforward, but they'll be checked daily by on-site management to ensure the extinguishers remain charged and the blankets are there. The restaurant design professional will approve all the equipment, ensuring proper use of extension cords and the heating and cooking devices meet indoor cooking standards or fire safety standards. There'll be the implementation will have accountability with layered SOPs, clear written standard operating procedures for fire prevention, emergency response. And equipment use will be developed and enforced. There'll be clear documentation and record keeping of training records, inspection logs, et cetera. And there's also been discussion of improved crowd management and evacuation plans. So summing that up, hopefully we can avoid incidents in the future and then move into comments. Or if I was accurate.
I think that sounds like a pretty accurate summary of sort of what we've heard about the plan going forward and sort of a little bit of what has happened and like what the situation is, unless like Parks wants to chime in too.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes.
I'd like to ask you a question of the gal, the woman, the she person, I forget how to do it properly these days, who is responsible for the activity in Bryant Park. Who's that?
That would be, like our partnerships person. That's usually, we usually deal with.
She's here. Can I ask her?
Yeah, also
Eileen.
partnerships.
Can I ask her?
Uh,
If you better let me do it quick, I'm gonna forget my question.
okay, Mike, but keep it really quick because we gotta really move forward with the discussion piece here so that we can move forward with the meeting.
Is it, your name?
Irene.
Irene,
Irene?
yes.
Hello, Irene. Michael. You've been in a park when it's hustling and bustling so you know how really packarooed it gets. Can you see a person of the employment in the park, of the organizing an escape route, during a situation where there's a conflagration, somebody actually, because there's very few people there, except the people who take out the garbage, walking around.
Actually, we have a lot of staff there every day. Myself, my colleagues, we walk through several times a day, checking on things. We do it all the time. We're on the ground. You just don't realize that we're not the public.
You have a dedicated like evacuation individual, like you would in the office where like, and I.
So you can see one of your folks taking over and
Yeah.
overseeing a safe, orderly as possible evacuation.
Yeah, there are several hundred employees on the ground. Not, I know you see the sweepers and the horticulture people, but we have a huge team running the skating rink, running the pop-up restaurant. And then there's the urban space staff as well.
So there might be a training meeting now generated by this to say, hey, folks, in case this happens again, here's what we're gonna do.
Absolutely. I mean, we already train for
Yeah.
this.
Do you think I could get invited to one of those training sessions? As a representative of the community board and a citizen?
We can see.
We can discuss that offline.
Okay, sorry, I took too much time.
Sorry, just a reminder for everyone to address the chair and that we
Sorry
still
about
follow
it.
Robert's rules, even if we relax
Okay,
some of it
sorry,
in our
my bad,
bylaws.
my bad.
In our bylaws conversations. Okay, so moving forward, what types of action do people want to take on this as a committee? Is there anyone that has any comments who maybe haven't heard from?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, following John's question, we'll follow up to collect the citation if there was any following from the fire department. And then I think continuing the conversation with urban space and the park together so that we can perhaps at the end of Q2, looking forward as you guys are continuing the plan of implementing these new policies and procedures so that we can just have a better understanding that these plans are getting in place as everyone's preparing for the winter season come summer. And then I think we would invite you to come back as we prepare in maybe June or July, just to check in and see how things are going with all of these, having these notes and knowing what we're looking to do next year to ensure that all I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and things are swiftly in preparation.
We'd be happy to come back.
Great, okay, great. Yeah, to the extent that we can help orchestrate some of that, that would be great. I'm gonna take one online and then Tom. Charles, do you have a comment for the business session, following up on what Annie just said about following up and having everyone come back in June or July?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to make a motion and just to agree with that. I just agree heartily with my fellow board member.
Great. Tom, did you have anything to add that was separate or different?
Yes, I just looked through, one of the things I didn't hear, like, maybe just.
Please address the chair.
Just here, sorry. Is like, you said there were 5 or 6 like propane tanks that were found after hours. Maybe adding checks on the boots, random checks on the boots to make sure they're off hours, they're properly maintaining the propane. Cause that was kind of the scariest thing I heard was like, oh, there's 5 or
Yeah, they're
6
not supposed
tanks.
to have any propane at
Yeah,
all,
just-
and so they're gonna be checking like twice a day on.
But off hours too, cause it was the storage that,
Yeah, all right. Does anyone have any problems with this? Great, that's great. We will hear, thank you for coming and sharing all this information. Our safety of our district is extremely important to us, so we really appreciate you all coming together and the fire department. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your time and your openness to running fire drills to keep everyone safe in these pop-up cities that happen and pop.
Yes, before, these folks leave, and I know some folks from Bryant Park, I know you all by name and not necessarily by face, I want to just connect with you a little bit. But one of the things that concerned me at Parks about this was, we really didn't have any real-time communication about it. So one of the things I want to do for everybody that's here, you all should have my number. I'm the park manager. You should have my number. Feel free to call me. Hate to say it anytime, but yes, at any time, so that the agency knows about this. For non-conservancy parks that have a regular park manager and a level 2 supervisor, we call these things into our central communications office. And what they do is they're able to notify the agency or the commissioner or whomever. They can even notify fire department or police department when there's an emergency. And we were a little bit offline this time with these incidents.
Okay.
Now, of course, we have community partners that do a very, very good job at managing their parkland and even intervening when there's a problem, but we didn't know. I mean, I actually was watching the news and I heard about this and I had to call. It was really kind of scary.
Yeah.
So I want to give everybody my phone number. Feel free to call me. We can talk about stuff too. Paul Evans' phone number is 917-295-5202.
Great, thank you so much, Paul.
So,
Uh,
Libby, will we be following up with a letter? Or do we do a resolution that says that we've heard all this?
we
and-
don't need to write anything about it. They're just gonna come back and present on the same topic and we will continue to off.
I just feel-
Unless you feel that motion is,
I feel-
unless you have a different motion to propose.
Not at this time, but I do feel like there's a lot to discuss here, and I think, I don't know who the representative on CB5 is for Bryant Park, because that would be you. So we'll leave that, Manuel, in your hands, and you'll let us know, okay? That's all I wanted. I just wanted to know that this, everybody took notes. I just wanted to know that this wasn't all going somewhere in a vacuum.
It's not going off into, it's not
Right.
gonna
On the calendar, we'll check in and.
Oh.
late-
Right,
Yeah,
that you
like
would
in
be-
May,
and
we're
if
gonna
you
have
need
sort
our
of
work,
a
Yes,
Christmas
absolutely.
update. Also,
Right,
the plan
okay.
too, with like
Thank
urban
you.
space agreeing to
I
come back,
just-
is that some of what's
Sure.
been discussed too is that urban space, you also do all of the holiday markets throughout. So we have not in prior years really handled the Columbus Circle holiday market, but that is also technically part of our district, and since
No,
you
we
are
didn't
also
hear
doing
that.
that.
Not predating you, but we have
Okay,
heard.
but we haven't heard it in
Right.
my time, like
Okay,
in that
so-
time frame. So
And so
think that
that's what
we'll
I
do
mean,
it.
there's a few
And
different
all,
levels
and there are a
here
couple of
of
other
follow-up.
markets that are sort of pop-ups that are street fair type things. So we're gonna try to get together a little
So
bit
I'll
more of a
leave that
fire
to you.
plan.
That's fine, as
especially-
long as it comes back around and we're not all asking the same questions and going who's who. Cause there's a lot of who's who here, and I just wanna be able to capture that, whether it's in minutes or Mineral, like I said, between you and the chairs, you all just
I
follow up
mean,
with
it
that.
might make sense for us to just memorialize everything that's been promised here.
Yeah, if we wanna write a letter to just sort of,
Yeah, I think we would probably have to check with Marisa about who it goes to, if
Supposed to- where
anywhere,
are we
or if
sending
it's just
the letter?
something we put on
Okay.
the record into the minutes or something. But I think,
So the letter goes
could-
to the people we've
yeah.
talked to tonight,
Yeah.
right? It goes to FDNY, we're asking about citations, it goes to Bryant Park Village, we're asking about crowd control and how we're asking urban space questions. All, these are a lot of different questions, and I just want to make sure that it doesn't all fall, and, quickly we'll be looking at Christmas again, so that's why I bring it up.
yes, I think
Because these are things that, some of these things are quick, fast questions, and some of these things we won't know for 6 months.
And
Yeah.
then we just go over the letter, all the bullet points and say, check.
yeah, if you would want to take point on that, especially when it comes to sort of some of the things that have been promised as far as like being able to do a fire drill and like an evacuation plan so that everyone can get out and get the
Yes.
fire. That would be great. Yeah. I know that I was sort of shocked
Before I
because
go, I'm sorry, I just cut in. This is Joe Castellano from the fire department. Do you have a public address system at Bryant Park?
Dan, do you have a public address system at Bryant Park?
For the rink, yes,
Mhm.
during the market.
For the rent? I've done the San Gennaro Festival detail, and they actually string up a public address system the whole route of the festival. And if they have an emergency or when it's over at night, they announce it over the PA system. That's something to think about for a fixed place like Bryant Park. It's not in the middle of the street. It's a location where you could, you know, mount some speakers, hardwire everything, and now you have a way of announcing to everybody what's going on and what the plan is. You know, if you're evacuating or go this way, go that way, whatever you need to get to people, that is a pretty reliable way to do it. So I just figured I'd throw it out there for you.
Great. Thank you for that. And thank you for everyone being here to really sort of like work with us in this plan. I like that. I mean, I'm certainly surprised that the fire safety around Christmas time is always what I grew up with, as far as like, you always make sure your tree is watered and you unplug the lights so that, so having, holiday markets have definitely something that, is sort of top of mind too. But it's especially with organizing all these agencies together, I think that's great, Catherine. And a great suggestion to make sure it doesn't
So do you want to make a motion? to that?
evaporate. Yeah.
I make a motion that we memorialize all that we've heard tonight in a letter to all the agencies that are represented here, that we start ongoing conversations that should move on a fairly regular basis, and all of those who want to report back here can do so, and through our office as well as through the relationships that we have with each organization, and that somehow what we do here helps us in a localized view is to move us past the silos. So you have parks telling us that they didn't hear from FDNY, and we live in a world of Twitter, social media, all kinds of tools, OEM. I'm not sure where they weighed in on this. I'm not sure how much 311, there's a lot to discuss. And so we just want to be a bridge where we can and hear what we hear.
Second.
I'll make that motion, right?
Great. Do I have a second?
Yes,
Charles
right
seconded.
here.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm going to open the floor, slate agenda change for a minute, just so we have Paul here.
We want to take the vote.
Oh,
Okay, take the
do-
vote.
okay, vote, sorry.
John,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Libby,
Yes. Can we do
Michael.
Yeah.
our bylaw?
Yeah.
Oh, we can now?
Yeah.
No,
Let's
not,
do-
not on this.
Not on this?
Charles,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
yes. And
Yes.
it passes.
Okay, great.
Point of order, we could on this, not like a
So-
resolution.
Okay.
This is a
Letter.
memorializing note,
Right.
so we could on this,
Yeah,
yes.
letter we technically.
The letter, yes. Like,
Yeah.
we're just saying like, oh, we heard this and you
Yeah.
can vote on that electronically. You put it on a resolution.
Well, it's also not even electronically. I think that we voted in the first bylaws change to do it by a vote of hands, but I'm not Tristan, so we can check back on that. And
Yeah.
Michael is
We'll get
our
it-
sometimes parliamentarian
We'll get
too,
it
so.
sorted for next time.
But Paul, you were unable to give your presentation last time, so, because of technical difficulties, if you wanted to give us an update on the parks while we have you, that would be great. Thank you.
So, all right, so a much more, I guess, mundane, discussion, but I'm very, very glad I could be here. This evening was very, very productive. So just a few things about, some of the parks business going on in Ward 5. We're currently reviewing the proposals received in response to the RFP. I think I mentioned that.
At
probably back
Union
in-
Square?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back very early in the winter season. For a year-round concession at Union Pavilion.
Paul, could you speak a little slower and a little louder? I got my hearing aids turned really loud. I'm reading the words, but it's still, I'm having problems.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
so the proposals are being reviewed with the Union Square concession and a selection we made later on this year. The current concessionaire that's there right now will continue this year and through the end of the year. The new concession agreement will not take effect until next year. Also, we're considering increasing the number of dates for the night market that was tried out this past summer on the South Plaza. The night market, which is made with various food vendors, had 4 dates last year. The additional dates would be in the period between June and October. And very curious whether the community board has any feedback on the expansion and increase in those number of dates. So wanted to tell you about that, those 2 bits of news about Union Square. And I also have some safety information for you as well about my favorite PEP giving out tickets.
Aha,
So
okay.
I can tell you, and it's for Community Board 5, actually it wasn't really that bad. There were 2 tickets at Union Square for unlawful vending. So the vendors are really getting the message. I'm very, very happy about that. This is for this last week, by the way. And 1 summons at Union Square also for failure to comply. So I think one of the vendors didn't want to do what he was told, but he probably got a ticket for that also. So
Okay.
that's smart enough. And I have more data here if you want to, review it for the month. But other than that, so we're just moving along through our winter season. That's one other thing I also wanted to say. I understand I got late message once again about needing help for snow removal over at Bryant. So if that ever happens in the future again, feel free to call me. if you do have a problem. Okay. Questions?
Thank you. I guess point of personal question on, I think some of that, the vending questions and stuff might be something that we can start thinking about. Some of that data that John brought up last time, as far as if we want to be like thoughtful about, just something, I'm gonna spin up a questionnaire form for everyone to kind of like brainstorm that, but that might be something for us to kind of put in. And then what was the second item that you brought up on the
The night market.
the night market? Yes, the feedback on that. Does anybody else have any feedback on the Union Square night market that happened? We heard this last summer. Does anyone have any feedback? I had a comment, so before. Okay, so my comment was, and while the urban space folks were here, it would have been great. That the load in was not great as far as blocking the bike lanes. And parking on a lot of the sidewalks, that the vendors sort of stayed loaded in. It wasn't sort of a quick load in and then they'd come back. It was just sort of cars everywhere for kind of a surprisingly long period of time. And I think that logistically was not really feasible.
Very good.
So if there's a better plan for that, that would be great.
So let me just, I don't want to speak in specifics. I know that there'll always be, this is New York, somebody's lane is always going to get blocked, but I can appreciate when you say too long of a period, anything like that needs to be tightened up.
Yeah, it was sort of all day throughout the duration of the market itself, which was also not very inviting to go. So if there's a place to sort of load in briefly within, like we look at that in our questionnaires with like a short period of time. I know that some of the other activations that the bid does, they load in very quickly and then the trucks are gone and then come back to break down the stage. So if there's some way to do it in a similar fashion, maybe. There might be a
Is
model
urban
for it.
space responsible for that market too?
Yes,
The
that
Union
is,
Square?
that is my understanding, is that Urban Space is also contracted for that market.
I'm not entirely sure, but
But it was through, it was through the bid. And then if you have plans to come back for that RFP, right? For the concession to when that is coming in,
when
you guys are reviewing it,
Well,
yeah.
when the decision is made.
Yeah, we're gonna come and, yeah, okay. Just checking as we prepare to talk about other RFPs. Does anyone else have any other questions for Paul?
I have one question. The south end of Union Square, I live close by. I've noticed lately the path from Union Square west to going east, right? It's pretty clear. Is that because of the cold weather, or has it been an enforcement to clear a lot of vendors? It's usually packed.
Oh, yeah, we've been cracking down on the vendors. I mean,
Is that, so that's the same topic you were just talking about here? or-
No, we're talking about
Okay.
this was about licensed vendors with
Okay,
licensed.
that's what I
program.
thought. These are unlicensed.
Unlicensed, there's always problems with, well, there were designated areas for unlicensed vendors to set up and sell their wares. But there are still guidelines for how they are supposed to set up. And there is a limited number of spaces, which I don't remember offhand, but there's actually a map, limited number of spaces, and basically first come, first served, and when it's full, it's, sorry, you can't be here. But people have not always respected that rule. It hasn't always been enforced fully, but then it became problematic. So now we're trying to dial it back and enforce the rule. And so I'm happy that you've noticed a change in the traffic being able to pass through the park. I think the weather also influences how many people show up and what they're going to set up. But yes, we have been definitely more strictly following the rules and having a lot more pet presence to enforce it. So, yeah.
And I think you made, in your last sentence, you may have answered the question I'm about to ask, but I'm not sure. Who issues the tickets? Who enforces all this?
Park enforcement.
Park enforcement.
Well,
And what do they, excuse my ignorance, what do they look like? What are they wearing uniforms,
Yes.
green uniforms?
Yes, they wear, some of, it's, gosh, what is it? Is it brown and green? I did not
Okay.
even remember.
Green.
Yeah,
It's great.
But no weapons or anything, they're just,
they have a baton, they don't have a gun.
okay, all right, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think I've seen like one or two, and they seem to be like sort of a newer presence that I hadn't seen previously in Union Square or not as regularly. So
There's actually a very, very small number. Some of the parks actually, like Madison hires its own detail. Some of the parks are able to hire their own detail, but there's actually a relatively small number of them. So, so we're very, very happy that they were able to accomplish what they do. But yes, I'm very pleased to have that feedback.
All right,
What about the vendors on the south side of 14th Street and right outside the Whole Foods?
If they're not on parks property, park enforcement doesn't have any jurisdiction.
Who would issue citation? NYPD?
helpful information.
on our district.
So is there any additional questions from any of our members online? Okay, Michael Gayback, got a question.
I was wondering if somebody could tell us how those new outdoor trash receptacles on 40th Street are working out to the benefit of the park. How are we feeling about those?
I can take that. Sorry about the 40th Street. one?
Yeah.
Those are ours.
I think they're yours too.
Yeah.
I was wondering how they are doing.
Sure, Katie Solomon from Bryant Park. They're great.
Oh, you're Katie.
They're really reducing our trash's exposure to the public and vermin. So it's a part of the mayor's initiative for trash containerization. We're complying and those units are rodent proof.
As long as the door is closed.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Paul, thank you so much for being here in person. It is great to meet you, and I'm sure we will continue to be in touch in an ongoing way. Really appreciate your time.
Yes.
Yeah, let's go. You were released. Okay, next up on the agenda, we have Bryant Park, and the new concession, for the concession restaurant in Bryant Park. We've got Dan Biederman, who I believe will be presenting with the new operator, the chosen operator.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
So you all know that this process has been incredibly long, deliberate, over a year. And as we've told people at our board meetings, we had 37 people were solicited, their interest, 11 people responded in ways we thought qualified to be advanced to an next round. We narrowed that down to 7. We narrowed that group of 7 down to 4, including the current operator, and have now made a decision. And the lease is not signed, but it's very close to being signed. But given we talked to Libby a number of times about showing up in January, we thought we'd come. So you are the first to hear that the operator will be Seaport Entertainment Group, John George. Matt Partridge is here from that group to answer, I'm sure, a ton of your questions that you had last time, and I didn't want to go too far in committing them or assuming the process was over, but the leases will be signed within a couple of days at worst. And we think it's the best combination. They present the best combination of operating record, financial strength, creative talent in the food and design field, and the like. So with that, you were full of questions last month. My staff might be able to answer some of them. Mark Bodwin is in charge of design and construction for Bryant. Katie, who you've already met, is in charge of operations. Irene is in charge of Winter Village, but also sponsorships, and is negotiating an arrangement with Seaport about sponsorships that will attach to the food facilities. So maybe the best thing, Libby, you tell me, just have open questioning by the committee.
I think that if we could hear a little bit more to begin with about the actual sort of like proposed thing, because it went through an RFP and sort of like what that concept is first, and then we can kind of follow up. Just to remind everyone on the committee, we when Dan was here for a very long meeting in December, we ran through a bunch of questions and sort of a hypothetical letter of what we wanted the Parks Commissioner to consider, because we have to weigh in before the Parks Commissioner can officially sign off, and what sort of the public is. And just a reminder, this is like about for a public concession in a public park, which sort of structured some of our stuff. Michael Southworth took the lead on writing that resolution. And I think you can pull up some of those sort of that criteria to remind all of us. Okay, thought I saw a question, but I don't not seeing a question. And so, but if we could hear a little
What
bit.
are you just saying? That
I-
question?
I thought I saw someone had a hand raised, but it's down now.
Okay, so maybe I'll introduce
Right,
Matt and
yeah.
have him describe in, a few minutes what their concept is. And obviously, nothing is final. There will be many discussions between the operator and me and our staff and our board. There's a board committee that heard all the presentations several times in case of some of them. That's 6 or 7 savvy real estate owners who are on the board of Bryant Park Management Corporation, basically surrounding buildings. And they're deeply involved in this process and help make the decision. So ready for Matt?
Great, Matt, if you could just say,
He's CFO of Seaport Entertainment Group.
okay, and if you could just spell your last name for us
Yep.
too, for the record.
So Matt Partridge, PARTRIDGE. And I'm the CFO for Seaport Entertainment Group. We own 25% of John George Restaurants, so they're a related party for us. From a concept standpoint, it's our.
Could you stand up?
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Bryant Park Grill is arguably one of the most important, if not the most important restaurants in the city. It's highly notable. Michael has done a terrific job of running it up to this point. We're very excited to be selected and be working with Dan and having interaction with all of you as part of it. Conceptually, it's going to be an accessible equivalent of a John George restaurant. So locally inspired menu, a very broad menu to do something that can be received by all the different types of constituents that come to the park, because it is a very broad group. From a naming perspective, it's going to have some component of John George in it. And then on the outpost, the porch, it's going to be a concept called Happy Monkey, which John George has at another location, and again, very accessible menu construct. So it's all in process, to Dan's point. Nothing's set in stone. We're still working through the design and the concept of it with John George. And we've been in talks with Dan for a long time going through this RFP process. So we've talked through conceptually what it's going to look like, but nailing everything down is going to happen over the next few months.
Okay, so just so I have that clear, so there's the John George like restaurant group, and there's many restaurants within that
There
group.
are, yes.
So when you say that it's gonna be sort of an accessible version of a John George restaurant, do you mean the restaurant in Columbus or like?
So I would say what we've talked about is some design elements that are similar to JoJo, which was John George's first restaurant in the city. But it's gonna be a specific design to Bryant Park, right? And as with all John George restaurants, they're all specific to the spaces that they occupy, and he develops the menu specific for those locations, and this one would be no different.
Okay, does anyone have any additional questions?
Okay.
So first, I'm just gonna have Michael remind us quickly what those sort of like, I think 4 criteria that we wanted our Parks Commissioner to review, just to refresh everyone's memory of our last conversation, just really briefly of like just the highest level.
Yeah, I
Like
think
4
the
criteria.
highest things were like. Switch to the right letter. But like accessibility and affordability are kind of main concerns. And then like public access versus private events, menu pricing, ADA compliance and physical accessibility, but that should be kind of obvious and standard. And then minimizing larger impact on the park outside. And then things about the operational and financial considerations, like the timing of the closure, how long it would be closed for, the staffing and employment practices, the financial stability and long-term stordship.
Should we do these one at a time so you can answer?
We're reviewing what we already talked about.
Yeah, and then, and basically transparency and compliance going forward, and just in terms of, and more that's just transparency really about how we'll be informed about changes, renovations, events, et cetera, as they arise. Is there anything else really top level that I'm missing?
I think that's hitting on most of our top level concerns. And we really talked a lot about what it means to be like accessible in a public space and like a public park concession. It is not a private only restaurant. It is a space where, you know, we have many people coming through. And I know that was, Dan had said that was really important for Bryant Park Corporation in picking. And it didn't just come down to some of the financial criteria of the restaurant. That was not the only consideration. It was really about sort of the health of the park overall. And what we can bring to the space after like the fabulous job that really like Dan and Bryant Park Corporation has done over the last.
And I'm looking at the actual letter that was drafted, and those 5 things were covered in it, so it's, yeah, I just said them.
Yeah, and yeah. Just making sure that we're hitting on some of those top line things and sort of considerations. I know that I certainly have some very specific John George questions too, as far as the financials. And some of the more recent news pieces with the Tin building at the Seaport and sort of staffing and that and sort of the financial structuring of things. And if you see a lot of restaurants fail on their first go on. So I just wanted to make sure that bringing to a new space that some of that has been considered and sort of what you were thinking about that. Just taking a point of chairmanship privilege to take first question.
Fire away. Happy to answer anything specific.
I guess like what is sort of the, can you explain a little bit more of the financial relationship and that breakdown with this restaurant and the group and the restaurant group and that ownership structure?
So Seaport Entertainment Group, we're a public company. We have a 25% ownership in John George Restaurants. We as Seaport would enter into license agreement or lease, however you want to refer to it, with Bryant Park Corporation. We would enter into a separate branding and concepting license agreement with John George Restaurants. And so we would pay rent to Bryant Park Corporation and we would pay license fees to the John George Restaurant Group. So truly arm's length relationship with both parties. John George Restaurants would be the one doing the concepting. They would create the menu, they would design the space, and then we would be the operator of that concept, like a traditional license agreement with a more traditional brand.
Okay. What, I guess if you could explain a little bit more about what the financial situation is at the Tin building as well. That's also then Seaport.
Seaport owns it?
Owns
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
That is your, in fact, thing,
Yeah.
more so than John George being.
So maybe if you wouldn't mind, if I can go back a little bit to how Seaport came to be.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Happy to do it. So Seaport Entertainment Group spun out of Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes developed the Tin building. Howard Hughes has historically owned South Street Seaport for a number of years. We were brought in, the management team and the hospitality team at Seaport Entertainment Group to take these assets out of Howard Hughes Public and really transform the company and these assets into more of a hospitality and entertainment focus rather than what Howard Hughes has historically been, which is a master plan community developer. So we've brought in a number of people from all walks of life, but largely in the hospitality and food and beverage space to come really in part to try to fix the Tin building, because the Tin building has not been a profitable venture from when Howard Hughes developed it. And so, you know, the Tin buildings, it's a unique offering, right? There's upwards of almost 20 different concepts under one roof. The leasing around the Tin building by Howard Hughes was primarily focused on office, and obviously with the Tin building coming online in 2022, that was the most optimal time to be focused on office leasing. And so we've shifted that leasing focus and that programming focus to more of a entertainment and hospitality focus
Okay. Can you speak to the, I guess, the recent articles that have been in the press about?
Sure. So we went public in August, separating from Howard Hughes. As part of that, we did an equity raise. Following the equity raise, we went through the process of working with the Jean George team to onboard as our team, not the Jean George team, but as the Seaport team, the food and beverage employees who were operating all of the restaurants down in South Street Seaport. That happened effective as of January 1st. So we onboarded from one separate company to Seaport, a wholly different company, all of those employees. As part of that onboarding process, certain employees weren't able to provide the adequate documentation for us to hire them legally. And so there were certain employees who were not able to be onboarded appropriately.
Okay. Got it. And there's also been some talk about sort of the financial arrangement. Does that mean that Seaport is taking on like additional, just sort of about the success or not of the, like the food market in that space?
So Seaport and by way of predecessor Howard Hughes have always owned the Tin Building. The Tin Building was owned through a joint venture, but Howard Hughes and now Seaport have funded all capital costs, all operating losses, all wages, all employment agreements. Everything related to that operation has always been funded by Howard Hughes or the Seaport. So John George simply facilitated the management and operation of it before we onboarded the employees on January 1st.
Okay.
So from a financial perspective, nothing has really changed. We continue to have 100% exposure.
Okay.
Can I just
Yeah,
some
just wanna follow up,
clarification?
yeah.
I'm a little confused. So in Bryant Park, not the Tin Building, but at Bryant Park, so Jean George, so the employees at the restaurant that will be run by Jean George will be Seaport
They will be
employees?
Seaport Entertainment employees.
They'll be Seaport
Yes.
Entertainment employees.
Yes,
But so what exactly is Jean George's role now? The
they are the
designing,
brand,
okay,
and they're doing the concept development and the design of the overall brand, but we will be the operator.
so once that's done, they're out of the picture, then you guys step.
Well, no, they're gonna hold us to their brand standards as a John George brand, so we'll have a license agreement that outlines all of these obligations that we have to adhere to the brand standards.
For sure. For sure, yeah. Tom,
I'm gonna ask a question that might help relevant. We're thinking something that's a little bit simpler, like a McDonald's for.
Yeah. Very,
Franchise.
very
In
good
this,
example.
in this example, you guys are gonna, which is not like a McDonald's, but
Sure.
just in this example,
Yeah.
you're gonna own the land, you're taking the lease from the Bryant Park,
Yep.
and then you're gonna have the employees, just like a franchise owner would,
Yes.
take on the franchise owner with the menu, the food, there's certain quality of, I don't know if George.
Quality of operating standards.
Correct, they might have
Yes.
like deal just certain meat packing and stuff like that, that
Exactly.
you have to take on.
We
As
have
part of the
food
license.
standards, beverage standards, all of these things that are outlined in that license agreement between Seaport and John George. The same way a McDonald's franchisee would have with McDonald's, where McDonald's outlines the standards that they expect. of their
So, and you've moved the Tin Building into a model where you own the property
Yes,
and you were. So it was kind of like the smorgasbords in like Boston Properties has, right? Like it was, you own the property, the employees are yours. So it's a separate situation. How many lease situations do you have now?
lease situations where other people
Where
operate.
where you are leasing from the land and then you're taking like a franchise through
So this would be the first time that we're leasing from a third party.
okay.
The rest of them, we own the land. We ground lease the land in the case of the Tin Building from the city of New York, but we control the land in that dynamic, yeah. And in this scenario, the way that we've structured the agreement with Bryant Park Corporation, we would be obligated to maintain all of the facilities and handle all the maintenance and repairs and everything associated with the actual physical structure of the grill and the cafe and the porch.
And then.
Tom, just direct.
Oh, sorry.
To the chair.
So with, the Happy Monkey, you're not involved with the Happy Monkey in Greenwich. That
Well, by way of our 25% ownership, we are.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but, so it is a little convoluted, I'm not happy to provide a diagram if it's helpful, but, so John George operates Happy Monkey in Greenwich. But that concept, the menu, just the general design and feel is what we'll port over to the porch, and we'll operate it on behalf of John George brand.
So he operates that when you're an investor in that.
Correct, indirectly, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna take a question from someone who is on our board, but who is not part of our committee, because I'm curious if some of his real estate background might be helpful. David Shapiro.
Hi, thanks so much, guys. A quick question. So I read the article there's been a bunch of press about the Tin Building, and when you look at some of the financials of the public company, you guys are operating at a loss right now. And I guess my question for the Bryant Park gentleman, and I apologize, I don't recall your name. Are there provisions in the lease that, I wish the best success for the Seaport team, but if they have financial challenges and for some reason they're not able to operate the facility, are there provisions in the lease that allow for the take back of the real estate to bring to a different operator?
Yeah, Dan Biederman, Bryant Park, there's a rent guarantee for the entire term.
I guess my follow-up question to that, if there's a rent guarantee, and I think David might also have a question about this. What happens to that space if the space isn't like operational? Like worst case, like they can't provide a restaurant, then we don't want sort of the dark space. Is there a worst case scenario plan for that so that we have people coming into the park, which has been so instrumental to the success of the park?
The current restaurant and cafe combined are doing $25 million a year. And obviously the park has a very good reputation and it's in Midtown in a good location and it's had a big impact on property values. So we don't expect, if should something go horribly wrong with Jean George and Seaport's efforts, that there would be a lack of people wanting to operate. There was a point during COVID where we reached an impasse with the operator on rent payments, although it was a tough time for everybody, including him. People came out of the woodwork offering us to operate it even during COVID when there was essentially no business, right after the city had reopened, but people were still not going to indoor restaurants. So we're not too concerned about that.
If I may.
Yes.
If it's any consolation, we just raised 175 million in October, and our balance sheet is over 600 million in total assets. So there is substantial there's a substantial number of assets behind our operation to support the guarantee that Dan's talking about.
Yeah, okay. David, does that answer your question adequately?
Yeah, but you're losing close to $33 million a quarter right now. So I guess I'm just concerned that like it's a negative cash flow business. And so I just want to make sure that if there is financial difficulty, that there is contingency plans in place. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe if I just
Yeah.
elaborate on that
Yeah.
dynamic. So the reason the management team that I'm representing was brought in was to solve the issue of losing 33 million a quarter. And we've only been public since August. So from that standpoint, that issue is obviously top of mind for us because we were brought here to stop losing money for that asset downtown. So you can expect that that's got some of our focus in terms from a financial standpoint.
Okay. And that is because you went public, but you had the 25% ownership, and that is how that arrangement worked.
We
But you're
just
owning-
spun out of the Howard Hughes entity. I know it's complicated. If any of you have been to the Seaport, it's a very different asset than a multi-thousand acre master plan community, which is what Howard Hughes, our predecessor, primary business was. And so they just didn't have the operational expertise to really focus on making the Seaport and specifically the 10 building a viable entity.
Okay, yeah, it's not Summerlin.
It is not Summerlin,
Um,
or the Woodlands or any of their other communities.
Okay, I'm gonna take another question from online. Charles.
Good evening, Charles Nye here. My question is for the guy from Seaport. I think it's Mr. Partridge, I think. So my question is, did you not have the opportunity to listen to the previous Parks Committee meeting where we discussed the Bryant Park Grill closure, and there were some very passionate testimonies from wait staff, wait servers, some of them who have been helped by the owner in hard times, some who had cancer and were recovering through cancer and was helped a lot by the owner, and how much of a family environment, like a family business it is to them. I would like to know if you had a chance to listen to those servers who your venture is about to make unemployed, and if you haven't, will you be committed today to stay through the public session if any of them are going to speak and listen to their concerns? And is there any guarantee, if this is to go through, to rehire those hardworking New Yorkers who, work in the food industry and who have, bills to pay and other commitments and things like that, and and rely on being employed, and especially in such a volatile industry as being a waiter? So thank you. I hope you can answer that. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Charles. Can you hear me okay?
Charles?
Yes, I can hear. Yes, I can hear.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm at the back of the room, so I want to confirm. I have listened to the stories that were shared during the last Bryant Park meeting, and have a ton of admiration for how the existing operator has taken care of those employees. Part of what we're endeavoring to do is be an employer of choice in the food and beverage industry in New York. We provide extremely generous benefits packages, the same benefits package I received. And as a public entity, we have the ability to give stock and other things that other restaurant employers just typically have the ability to do. So from that standpoint, we're committed to providing a great work environment, great compensation structures, great benefit structures. We're going to give every employee at Bryant Park the opportunity to interview to keep their jobs, right? It would be foolish of us to not entertain that group of people. I can't give any guarantees that one person will be hired or won't be hired, because obviously we haven't gone through that discussion or assessment with each individual, but I can say emphatically that we are going to assess any and all of the employees and determine whether or not they're the right fit going forward.
Todd.
Thank you, Libby. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for appearing before our committee. As Michael said, one of the top level concerns was affordability and appropriateness of your method of operation for all the different types of people at various levels of income to use and enjoy the park and partake in your restaurant. I'd like to hear from you whether or not your method of operation and your licensing agreement has enough flexibility to allow pricing that would appeal to all of those, both at the high end and the low end. And if you could give us some specific examples of, price points on your menu. Our committee has, in advising and commenting on Bryant Park, has always tried to recommend in Bryant Park's management to try to be affordable and do things that are appropriate for a public space, even though it's run by the Bryant Park Corporation. Can you speak to that?
Sure. From an affordability standpoint, I can tell you the Bryant Park Corporation team has emphasized that from day one, right? Accessibility was probably the most emphasized component of this RFP, if I'm being honest. You know, maybe that was specific to us, given the higher end nature that John George is known for. We wouldn't be standing here today if we weren't committed to providing an accessible product. I can't give you specific price points on the menu because the menu's not been fully developed. From a flexibility standpoint, Seaport Entertainment Group is gonna set the pricing. So Bryant Park may set the menu. They may set the recipes, but we set the pricing, we facilitate the purchasing. We think that we'll be able to deliver a more accessible price point because we're able to do both purchasing with the restaurants that we own down at Seaport. And through our relationship with John George and his nearly 40 restaurants around the world. So we think we can deliver a high quality product with an excellent atmosphere that's accessible to all walks of life. I mean, I can speak personally. The first time I came to New York when I was 25, I went to Bryant Park. I wouldn't have been able to afford a John George restaurant at 25, but I could go to Bryant Park. And so that's not lost on me. I know it's not lost on the team that that's the type of environment and that's the type of product that we have to deliver at the right price point.
Just to follow up on the affordability and accessibility is sort of a piece of that structure. I know that given sort of global affairs right now, a lot of folks in the restaurant industry are looking at tariffs and looking at staffing questions. I've heard things like people are expecting prices to go up 25% in the next 6 months. I've heard that people are expecting prices might go up in 25% in the next 6 months. Just there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And it depends on sort of like what's going to stick from a supply chain issue versus not like there's many unknowns and they're unknown unknowns too. So it's hard to plan. As far as like menu pricing or whether it's like specific pricing or sort of a percentage of the menu so that someone who's 25 and coming to Bryant Park can always come and have the full experience of this restaurant and this restaurant concept. I want to make sure that we're as like flexible with that for you, but if there is sort of the need to change menu pricing or to be creative and like redesign a menu, would you be willing to come back to this committee prior to making any sort of like dramatic like
We view this
upcharging
committee
changes?
as a partner in all of this, right? Obviously Dan and his team are substantial partners, but Bryant Park is a massive component of the community, whether it's the island of Manhattan or whether it's the community specifically. So happy to have dialogue whenever you want, whether it's formally or informally. Again, we're committed to having an accessible menu. I can't stress that enough because it's been stressed to us over a multi-month process. And again, if we didn't think we could deliver that, John George wouldn't be signing up to do this. We wouldn't be signing up to do that because it's not exactly a low profile opportunity. And so if we're going to make commitments to having an accessible price point, we know we need to deliver on that.
I'd like to hear from Dan. Dan, in negotiating the lease, is there anything is there any power or ability of the Bryant Park Corporation to step in if the promises as to affordability and access prove to be fleeting or illusory?
Todd, just a reminder to address the questions to the chair, and Dan, please go ahead and answer.
Sure. There's subtle pressure as the prior operator can testify who's here from us on things not meant to put a strain on the business, Todd, but make sure we have a place that makes the surrounding property owners and their tenants happy, because they're the ones who are paying about 1/12 of the budget of Bryant Park through an assessment, and they're represented on the board of directors. So that's one direct way of affecting the operator, Todd, and that's been expressed through things like restrictions on the number of closings. That was in one of your 9 points. Not too often private parties. I think a lot of operators, no fault of theirs, would love to have more private parties. They're very profitable. They're guaranteed business. There's less food wastage. There's alcohol sales. But we keep a control on that. So that's an example, Todd, of where the pure financial answer for the operator and ultimately for us has not been chosen. in the interest of pleasing the community. We don't want regulars to come up and find the restaurant closed all the time because there's a private party. So there's a restriction on that, and the pricing would be another example of the subtle pressure, I guess, jawboning, if you will, that we would exercise.
Thank you, Dan.
Additional
ask-
question.
Yeah, can I ask one quick question here?
Hang on, David, I just want to go to some folks who maybe haven't spoken, asked as many questions yet. John?
Yes, it's my understanding and impression that that your brand, at least as it pertains to this particular restaurant, is a pretty up and little louder, please, sir. The brand historically has been more on the upper end. So my question to you is, why are you in Bryant Park? Are you trying to create a flagship situation, or is it primarily a marketing thing, or is it to make money, or what? I'm just curious because when I first heard about it, that was my first reaction. And this seems to be inconsistent with, it doesn't align with virtually all your other
So I
establishments.
think from the Jean George brand perspective, Jean George has been operating in New York, or has been in New York since the 1980s. So for him, you know, doing something that is quintessentially New York, I think is important. Bryant Park is that. So I think from that brand alignment, it certainly makes sense. Obviously, if we're doing our job as the manager the right way and we're paying them licensing fees based on a percentage of revenues, which is the way it's structured, they're gonna make money, which is great, right? They're in business to make money. But no, I don't think this is
it doesn't work against their brand, or
I don't think it works against the brand. I think for him and for the brand as a whole, it's a way to create diversity of product type, right? It is a little bit more accessible than the typical Jean George restaurant, but it's also a representation of what he is, which is he's a huge proponent of New York. He's been in the city for over 40 years. And so I think that is as important as anything from a brand alignment perspective.
thank you.
Catherine, did you have a question? Okay.
You're gonna have comments and questions?
Yeah, comments are gonna come later. First, we're gonna do, first we're gonna do questions. For everyone focusing on sort of those top line criteria that we outlined, just a reminder in December, to get more information about sort of the concept, and especially now we're on the topic of affordability and sort of the concept and sort of experience of providing an affordable product. Tom, question.
So we were talking about pricing, it's gonna be like in line with like the Greenwich model or some of the other restaurants, right?
I don't think you should use the existing Jean George restaurants as a reference point for pricing.
So what reference point should we be using?
I think we're gonna look at what the current price point is at the Bryant Park Grill, the cafe, and the porch. And then we're going to endeavor to fit within that framework and go up from there, right? Because certain dishes will necessitate certain pricing, and it's going to be a very broad menu. So there'll be things on the menu that are a higher price point, and there will be things on the menu that are a lower price point.
And then, the other question, is it like, so you guys own do you guys own 25% of the, like, is your investment 25% of the Jean George brand?
Yes.
Or 20?
We own 25% of Jean George restaurants holistically, so the restaurants that they operate, the brand in totality. So obviously, from that dynamic, if we're paying them licensing fees, we're indirectly
Paying yourselves,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so there's an
Wait,
alignment.
do you have a follow-up question to that, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay.
So is this more in line with where like his restaurants around transportation hubs, like if you go, like it's in Greenwich and then you go down to Jersey, like, is that like the concept? You're like, hey, are you trying to get more in line with this traditional model?
No, I think, again, he historically has designed the restaurant both aesthetically and from a menu perspective specific for that location. And so that's gonna happen here too, right? We wouldn't do this broad of a menu, or they wouldn't do this broad of a menu for something that just didn't have this level of visitation and the broad spectrum of types of people, right? necessitates a broader menu because of that.
Okay, I'm gonna go to
Yeah.
Catherine, who we have not
Yeah.
heard from yet, asking
So
questions.
in our lens, we've talked a lot about this is a private entity in a public space. And this is also by Bryant Park, a futuristic move that this restaurant wasn't necessarily on its last leg, but looking 30 years down the road. So one of the things I heard you talk about is limiting private events is a way to maintain the public character of the space, that the menu is going to be accessible. But can you give us some other, one of the things, I think the city appreciates is sustainability of the menu. Is there gonna be vegan vegetarian and vegan options? Some of those kind of futuristic, that there's supposed to be some innovation and ingenuity in the model. So if you could speak to that from a public-private, I also think that this is a model. I said this before, we take for granted that Bryant Park operates in the green. Most public parks do not. There are public parks that are over there by the Hudson River. They can't find an operator cause I'm like, I can't even get my bike up and down the stairs. But, but it's a Hudson River view. So if you could just talk a little about that. Thank you, Libby, for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if you look at some of the offerings that John George has, and even at the Seaport, we have a concept called ABCV, which is an entirely vegan restaurant. He has leaned into, if you look at a lot of his restaurants, vegetable forward offerings. So I think that certainly is something that will be part of the discussion when we're assembling the final menu. From a sustainability standpoint, it's an important component of what they do. He works with a lot of different purveyors when it comes to where they source their food. We do as well. So I think all of that's part of the discussion. I can tell you, they emphatically want us, where possible, to use non-GMO ingredients.
They possibly want you to do what?
Non-GMO ingredients, so genetically modified. It's in the license agreement between us and them. It's a brand standard they want us to adhere to. Now it has to be accessible, right? You can't fly halfway around the world to get a non-genetically modified ingredient, but that's part of the lens that they look at creating the menu through, is those types of things. So I think from that standpoint, it's very aligned.
Thank you.
And can you speak a little bit more, just bumping on what Catherine said about food waste? I know that the James Beard Foundation has been really big on food waste and really placed a big emphasis on that, especially for restaurants, especially because it's keeping it open. And Dan's point of not doing the private events, which you will still do catering events for, but just the public restaurant piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, food waste is quite honestly how you limiting food waste is quite honestly how you operate a profitable restaurant. If you have too much food waste, you're never going to be able to make your margin work. So it's as much in focus for all the right reasons as it is for the financial reasons.
Okay, I'm gonna go to David Shapiro because he's been waiting, and then we can come back to you, Mike.
Guys,
David.
hi, thank you. So I'm looking at the last quarterly and you have about 25-ish million of cash and you're losing north of 33 million a quarter. So from a solvency standpoint, how do you guys expect to move forward? You're going to you want to raise more capital? I find the financials of this operation to be very questionable for a public park. And I'm happy to comment more when we get to the comment section, but I want to understand how you guys are going to be on ongoing, excuse me, an ongoing concern without raising a significant amount of capital over the next over the next 9 months.
Fair question, David. So the quarterly results that you're looking at were a split quarter between our ownership and from spinning out of Howard Hughes and Howard Hughes's ownership. And so the cash burn associated with that quarter is highly elevated because we not only built out a team that was on P&L during the July month, but we also had all the corporate costs associated with Howard Hughes during the July month. So I don't think that quarter is a good representation of the go forward profitability. The other thing that I would point you to is we did $175 million equity raise in October, which isn't reflected on that balance sheet because the balance sheet is September 30th, but That added obviously substantial liquidity to give us the tools and the financial viability that we need to solve the problems. But Seaport could be a relevant company going forward.
David, does that answer your question, or do you want to have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, I that's my question. I have a comment later. Thank you.
Okay. Charles, I'm gonna go to Mike, and then I'm gonna come to you, Charles. I
Quick
know that you've been
question,
waiting.
easy one. So we were told to expect from May, when you guys would be taking over, a 10-month period of no activity in the restaurant. Are you still beholden to that? Does that sound right to you today?
Yeah, do you want me to speak to the timeline or would you like to?
Yeah, there was a request from the current operator for an extension of his lease, which we offered in two tranches, one that would have gone to July, one that would have gone to October. He turned those down. One of the reasons was we thought Seaport would need some time to get ready to do the construction and kitchen renovation necessary. So we believe not so much with the porch, which will be Happy Monkey, which might open up right away in the spring, but with the grill and the cafe, because of renovation delays, there'll probably at some point be about an 8 or 10 month delay where they are not in service. The park can withstand that. We spent years building for a nonprofit an incredibly healthy profit and loss statement. We have a lot of sources of income, and the public forgets this, but the Bryant Park Grill didn't open until almost 3 years into Bryant Park's new life. The park was terrific. Everybody loved it. We got an award from Time Inc. for the most radical transformation of public space, all during the time when the restaurant didn't exist. But we'd love to have the restaurant back as soon as possible. We've said that to the Seaport people, and we're really hoping it won't be much longer than that, 8 to 10 months.
The current plan is to take possession and start construction August 1st.
August 1st. Okay. That's an important timeline question. Okay, Charles. Do you have a question?
Yeah,
on
I'm wondering, yes, about the menu that other members have brought up, the affordability. I have a question about that. So affordability is very vague. For example, you can go to Two Brothers Pizza and get 2 slices of pizza and drink for like $2 and something cents. Could someone who's homeless or on fixed income be able to get a meal, an entree or an appetizer at this establishment? In fact, do you have a dress code, or do you expect diners to dress in a certain way? Would a homeless person or someone who's not dressed in a particular way be turned away from your establishment? And I was just wondering, my second question, Chair, is also why haven't the park users get a chance to weigh in on what they would like in that space? I mean, after all, it's the park for the people. Surely they should have some sort of say if they, what they want in replacement of Bryant Park Grill. In fact, if they want Bryant Park Grill to stay. So I would like to know how much public, getting public opinion from park goers was actually done. Thank you.
That's us. We're the public.
We are the public, Charles.
Maybe I'll tackle the first one.
But yes, first question. Thank you.
Yeah, from an accessibility standpoint, like I said, we're using the existing menu pricing as a reference point, right? We're not saying we're gonna be above or below that. It would probably be some wide swath given the breadth of the menu, but that's our reference point. And from a dress code perspective and all that, this is not a white tablecloth restaurant. This is intended to be accessible, right?
For both the main restaurant and the
Correct.
porch, which are 2 separate things. It
Correct.
also sounds like 2 separate concepts.
Correct, 2 separate concepts, but neither one is meant to be a white tablecloth dining experience. It's meant to be accessible.
Okay.
With regard to the second part of the question, I think by now, after having managed the renovated park for 32 years, we've earned a reputation as a good steward. And almost everything that's in the park now that makes it successful came from the minds of the staff and the board, rather than a result of some kind of engagement session with the public. If they like it, they use it. And if they don't like it, they don't use it. But we didn't do a formal engagement process with the park users to find out what kind of food they would want, and if we're judged to be wrong in what we did, then they won't go.
Okay, Michael, we haven't heard from you yet.
Just one question. I think you mentioned that you were bringing someone up from the team at the Seaport to help work on like corporate sponsorships or integrations or things like that. And I just sort of wanted to know, was curious what that meant. Should we be looking at more types of events that are sort of like, that are held down there? Or is it the intention to continue like weddings, private corporate events, galas, that type of thing? I was just wondering if there were, what that was in reference to or what that was about.
So we have a sponsorship team down at the Seaport. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, we have a sponsored series down there. We have different things that the sponsorships attract interest for. We're going to partner with Irene and the Bryant Park team. Okay. Right, on the partnerships. We'll continue to do private events and things like that, as Dan mentioned, but Irene's been doing this successfully for a while, and so we're going to take direction and guidance from them to be, good partners and stewards as we get our footing as a new operator.
Okay. I guess in essence, I was getting to like, should we expect there to be like a concert series and things like that that are?
They already have a great one, right?
Well, no, but like Bryant Park has its own, but I mean like a highly exclusive $500 ticket type, that type of thing.
That's for them to facilitate, to Dan's point. If
These are sponsorships related to.
Yeah.
The porch and the restaurant.
Yeah, we're purely in those specific facilities. What happens within the park, if we're happy to help if we can, right? We want to obviously be good stewards, but that's Dan and Irene and the rest of the team.
So would that be like a different name than John George coming in and saying like brand name at Happy Monkey at the porch of Bryant Park?
We've had that for many years.
Okay.
Porch has been sponsored for 15 years by different brands.
Okay.
So
They're
that's
just
an
like looking
example.
for examples.
Does that end up
to
going
flesh that out a little bit.
does that end up going through you, your team? Okay.
Yeah, so we'll have a partnership with them, and if you look at John George restaurants, there's not a lot of that type of branding, right? It's very selective.
Yeah.
And I think we'll be selective in partnership with Irene.
I'm okay. Michael K. Back, did you have a question?
Comment.
Okay. So I think that you have agreed to come back to us too. So that was my sort of like last kind of question from the committee, but I would like to take this to, there are no additional questions. If you guys will hang around for our discussions, we have different ones that come up during our discussions, that would be great. But I'd like to take it into public comment and then move into our business session. So beginning with any public comment from members of the public who are in the room. Yes, if you could introduce yourself and say your relationship.
CEO of Bullock Restaurants,
If you just speak a little bit louder for people who are on them.
maybe on. Michael Weinstein, CEO of Bullock Restaurants. I'm not usually a loudspeaker. So, I have prepared comments, but I first of all, thank you for your compliments on how we run the restaurant. Dan, I thank you for your compliments on how we run a restaurant, which you said in the press. There are two comments I want to make before my prepared comments. First of all, Dan said he offered us an extension, which we turned down. He offered us extensions with some observances about that he didn't want us to fight or put up a fight against the transfer of this operation to a new entity. So it had conditions on it. And he did offer it to us twice, but it was not in the best interest of my 250 employees, what he was asking us to do. We're here fighting for 250 employees. And we've been saying that when we've been interviewed. I think it's disgraceful, Dan, that you make it sound like you offered us something. You offered us something with conditions that were unacceptable.
Can I respond?
No, sorry, we were in the public comment period.
Number one. Number two, I'm amused here, if it wasn't going to affect 250 employees. I'm amused because he's using our price points. We run a highly successful restaurant. People love it. We had a portal opened up, Save Bryant Park portal on our website. We had over 6,000 people respond into that portal of how much they love the restaurant. Take a look at our social media reviews. You know, on a 1 to 5 basis, 90% of them are 5s. Maybe there are 2 or 3 1s or 2s in the place. We make mistakes once in a while, but we have a highly people love us. The other thing I'd like to make mention of, Matt, and this is not an attack, I mean, I am.
Yeah, just please address
Yeah,
the chair.
I am so much in love with what John George does. I think he's an inspiration to every restaurateur in the country. They're going to pay a licensing fee in addition to rent. So by that alone, unless the licensing fee is 0.5%, that licensing fee interferes with their ability to be as affordable as we. All right, it's another expense item on the P&L. We're gonna have to rationalize that, and that's gonna be through higher prices. John George has operations all over the country. I'm sure has a good purchasing department. We not only buy for ourselves in New York, we buy for 112 other restaurants in New York who pay us a fee to buy because we're that efficient for them. So our pricing in the restaurant somewhat reflects our efficiency in our purchasing endeavors, not only for ourselves, but for other restaurants. If you need help with that, I'm happy to show you this.
Appreciate
Please,
All right.
please address.
So I'm sorry, I didn't address that to you. So what you have right now is a highly successful restaurant with affordable pricing that's been going 30 years, that's paying Dan over $3 million a year. And their proposal for minimum rent, from what I understand, is about $1 million less as a minimum rent. They had a percentage rent deal of top the $1 million difference. But our percentage rent deal, we paid a larger percentage rent than they had proposed. Now my prepared remarks, please. Unless
Okay,
you want to ask.
if you can just keep it brief, we're just trying to
I
move through
am.
the meeting.
All right.
Thank you.
So you know who I am. Earlier today, we sent a letter to Marissa Mack asking CB5 to allow more time before making a final decision to endorse or oppose BPC's selection of a new restaurant operator. Until just a few moments ago, this operator was a complete mystery. Their identity wasn't even included on tonight's agenda. Ask yourselves, how much do you actually know about the operator other than what Dan Biederman and Matt has chosen to tell you? Are you aware that their best and final offer for rent was hundreds of thousands of dollars less than ours, up to $1 million less per year? Are you certain about their commitment to affordability like we have proven over 29 years? This has been called a landlord-tenant dispute that can be further from the truth. This is a public concession on public land in a public park. Despite what Dan Biederman has claimed, the Parks Department isn't just rubber stamp approval. That's what Dan said in the last meeting. And neither should the community board be rubber stamp approval. Your December resolution included very strong language expectations to the selection of a new operator. I urge you to take a closer look before voting on any resolution. Finally, I urge you to consider 250 employees who will lose their livelihoods if you do not challenge the decision to evict Bryant Park Grill. The 250 employees aren't going to wait around 10 months to be interviewed. So, you know, that's a specious argument. That's my comment.
Thank you. Okay, any members of the public, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand and wait to be called on, and I will permit you to talk. And please keep your comments sort of to the point as it's getting on in the evening. And please remember to address all your comments to the chair. Ryan Kayla.
Hi. I've got a pretty bad echo on my side. Don't know if it's coming through on yours. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. A little bit of feedback. If you can
Ryan
just
Kyloff,
mute yourself, then it'll, like, if you just dial down the volume, it'll be less feedback.
Gotcha. Ryan Kyloff, I work for WNYC. It's the NPR station in town. And I guess I'm addressing comments to the chair. I'm wondering, and this is not a question session, but about the new operators' use of E-Verify. So for a little bit of background, E-Verify is a employment authorization tool, more popular in southern states, less popular in New York. There is currently a bill in the New York State Senate to ban E-Verify in most locations because advocates for open immigration, et cetera, believe that it has discriminatory effects. I understand that Seaport Entertainment sort of inherited the use of E-Verify from its original parent company. It was spun off of Howard Hughes, which is based in Texas. And that was, I'm told by a spokesperson, part of the staffing issue that took place around the new year at Seaport. Was part of that was using E-Verify, which asks for all the same things as the I-9 employment form, authorization form, but adds a layer of scrutiny by matching you against various federal databases. This is the reason it's criticized again for privacy invasion issues. So to the chair and folks, that would be a public interest concern that I would urge you to consider. I understand this is not the moment for questions, but at some point, perhaps in my day job capacity, I'd be curious to hear what the new operators have to say about that.
Thank you. Longtime listener, hadn't been a caller, but thank you for your comment. Really appreciate it. Are there any other comments from the public? Please raise your hand and I will promote you to a panelist to be able to make your comment. All right, I don't see any members of the public. David, you'll be part of our business discussion, so. Okay. With that, I will bring the conversation in the meeting back to our business session for our comments and discussion of how we want to move forward with this, and where we left it. Just as another reminder, where we left things was with the criteria that we wanted the Parks Department to consider for any operator, which we've addressed and asked more questions of the chosen operator. So one of our options is to write an updated letter given to opine, as we are prescribed to do, on what we think of this operation and this operator and the process and how things happened and what we want them to look at in their review of the new operator. And sort of like what we think, and we can include all these criteria, and we can sort of add what we'd like and update it based on the new information that we have heard here tonight. So I will go to David Shapiro first, if you had a comment still.
Yes. So I think Jean-Georges restaurants are terrific. I think that they are, I'm very supportive of them in the hospitality business. I have very significant concerns about the financial capability of this business and their ability to be able to do to open and then to stay open and to not have pressures and have to make dramatic changes to their operational model. And so I want to go on record for saying that there should be some real considerations based upon the public financial math here. And that's my concerns. Thank you.
No, that is very much heard, especially in light of a lot of the financial arrangements that I think that my head's still a little bit confused on the 25% ownership and all the other restaurants that are involved too, as far as like really evaluating some of that stuff. All right, anyone else in the room
Can I
first?
ask a point of clarification?
Yep.
So, and it So my understanding from Bryant Park Village is that there is a guarantee of rent. Right?
Yes.
So the guarantee of rent means that for the lifetime of the lease.
That is
For the
my, Dan,
right.
can you clarify that for
Yes.
us? That it's for the lifetime of the lease,
So-
but for the
That
10-year
doesn't
period?
change the questions about public financials, but I just want to keep that in mind because this is not a private endeavor, this is a public endeavor. And so we want to see a vibrant restaurant running, not an empty restaurant that paid rent is the
Right.
Yeah.
way I would say it. But in any case, I also say that the due diligence here in the financial realm doesn't fall on us, but we can point
Provide
to it,
comments,
that there
yes.
has been due diligence conducted by people who look at these things and
Or that the Parks Department should do additional.
and
their
not
own
only the
sort of
Parks
separate
Department, but Bryant Village, the park itself, the Bryant Park Village itself, the Parks Department, but we can point to what we feel, because we're trying to see the public, this run as a public-private partnership where the public is active, not where the financials necessarily are only, and this is not supposed to be a financial.
But it's not only a financial agreement, but if they need
agreement,
to make
yeah.
their bottom line, then what does that do to the menu if they also want to be running too?
Yeah, I'm less, right. I wanna see we wanna see the public in the public,
In the public space.
yes.
Annie,
Yeah, I would piggyback off of that, and then to what David's saying, like our concern highlighting in a resolution, or is that what we're?
it's gonna be a resolution and the resolution will be like contained in our letter to the Parks Commissioner.
Yes, I think that we should be highlighting this as a major component, because this was missing in the last meeting, just given the fact that it was not yet announced who the establishment had chosen. So I think knowing what we know and being of heightened concern that the goals seemingly shared by all parties here today, and certainly on behalf of the public that we represent, wanting to move forward with an accessible, affordable restaurant that can be enjoyed by all, as the precedent's been set, but we, going off of the answers that have been given, are still slightly concerned that there are just
The
like,
affordability of.
there are
some things
numbers
a
that
bit
we
more
don't,
expensive
and
and some things
to
will
the
be less
answer, we
expensive.
don't have the Q4 numbers yet, so if there has been
And the-
substantial raise, is there a
The other
consideration
part of this
of raising
is,
going on?
what I say is that there should be some opening, that if the restaurant is not running as it is, that they should not be able to hold space just based on guaranteed rent. That
That
you,
we should, that there should.
that there should be some public element or something that
Guaranteed
helps.
staying open.
Right, there should be some window of opportunity to change and switch gears.
All right, please address questions to the chair and I will call on you to keep things a little bit more orderly.
Yeah, it's, how long is the lease? And then so far.
It is, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, please, but it is 10 years with a 5-year option to renew
15 years with 3-year option.
with a free, okay. So slightly
How-
different than I
how
think
many?
what we had initially.
15 of 3.
18.
So it's 18, but it's a 15-year lease, not a 10.
Yeah, 18 primary, and then there's options thereafter.
Oh, it's 18 primary with options thereafter. Okay, so that's longer than I think we'd initially been told.
Can I help
that
clarify her
RFP.
comment though?
Uh,
Am I allowed or no?
not just yet, but hold on.
Are we still in comment?
We are still in business session. We are in our,
I can make a comment.
you can make a comment.
But you were gonna call on him first.
I was gonna call on Murnell, yes,
Go ahead.
'cause we haven't heard from him as much.
So, first thing, we still don't know what the lease looks like. I mean, we're guessing around a lot of, we have bits and pieces of information here, but I mean, we weren't clear on what the term of the lease is.
The length of the lease does
The
seem to be
length of the
different
lease
than
is,
what
and
originally
the
understood.
guarantee of the rent, this is something that came up here, and so we now knew and now know. But we don't know what the lease looks like. I mean, this was one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting is, it's hard to opine on something when you don't know what the terms of the lease are, so.
I don't know that we would though. I apologize.
Are we not gonna know what the terms of the lease are?
So this is not, we're not here for the real estate decision. We're here for the public part public-private.
But the two play into each other, Catherine, right? Yeah, I mean,
Please address the comments to the chair.
yeah, so, yes, my take would be that the two do play, the two do play into each other, so, to whatever extent the terms of the lease are relevant to the purposes of this discussion, I think we should have more clarity. I think we are flying a little bit blind here.
All right, please address.
That's one, and then, what was I gonna ask? I had another question,
I can circle back to you.
we can,
I just want to take, Todd's had his hand raised. I want to get Todd into the conversation and then I will come to you, John.
I do remember what the second bit was.
Can you?
Okay, yes.
Todd,
Did I hear that I was recognized?
you recognize Todd.
Yes, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Todd Shapiro here. So, I believe that, the Dan and the Bryant Park Corporation, they have the contract and they have the discretion to go ahead with this. Our job, however, is to comment on the impact and suitability of this lease, which is 18 years, and whether or not it holds true to the concerns of affordability and general public access. And we have a new concessionaire here that is going to have to prove it. Now, Dan has given us assurances that they will do so. He cites his past history. Given the fact that we didn't even know who the lessee was going to be, as has been pointed out, we've now learned it's 18 years. We've learned that they're going to be collecting less rent. I think what our resolution should say is that we have reservations given, the lack of history and the lack of time to do our due diligence with the material facts of the lease, and that we would hope that the Bryant Park Corporation will be sensitive to these issues, and that we reserve the right to comment based on input to our community board if it turns out that this lessee is not open to all of the concerns that were mentioned at our last meeting. One other word is what was said in the press about their management practices, about the tin house. And look, these are business decisions ultimately, but we live in a political environment and a business environment. We should keep our voice, and if we see that those kind of practices come up over a long period of time, we should comment on them. And I would urge Dan and the members, the ownership and operators of the new lessee to appear before our committee if issues arise.
Thank you, Todd. John, you had another comment?
Just listening to everyone here, including David. I guess the issue I'd like to see highlighted in the letter, and it's related to the original decision, I suspect too, is addressing the issue of the sustainability of the business from an ownership and management standpoint. I guess I'm looking at the two structure, looking at the existing business, and then I'm hearing about the new structure. It's raising more questions about which one truly is the most sustainable. So, and if to go on what Catherine was saying about it being a public element to this project, then I guess the question to me is, should there be some public entity sort of coming in and making, giving their opinion on this?
Like an outside group, like looking at the
Well,
financials
Parks
and
would
some,
be
but yeah.
Yeah,
But
I'm not
someone,
suggesting we get a consult, no, I'm talking.
yeah, not
about
us hiring consultants, but like
somebody who's
some other
accountable-
public
Somebody
entity
who's
that
accountable to the public.
that
who
does.
Actually can make a decision as opposed to just being an advisory group. you know, someone who can give a go or a stop to something like this, or have a heavy influence.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
just-
the
I'm
Parks
just throwing
Department
it
has
out.
to, they have to formally,
Library.
yeah, the Parks and Library combined, and then we have to weigh in, so we
Right.
give our opinion, but we can strongly
Yeah,
say
but
like.
increasingly, this is the issue I'm thinking, how sustainable is the ownership? That's what I'm hearing tonight.
Yeah.
And
This
keeping it
new
open
entity,
versus
that-
prices
and
going
that
up
could be
versus
an
having a
issue
dark
with the
restaurant.
Existing owner too, and then I don't understand the sustainability of the management. Oh,
Madam Chairman, is there a point at which I can correct some of the misstatements that have been made?
Not currently, sorry. Ooh,
Let me know when I can.
so.
Sorry, we're having a technical issue.
Lots of feedback.
Definitely a glitch.
It's always the vice chair's problem.
Yeah, so I was just suggesting they be incorporated in the letter as issues.
As issues of the
Yeah.
financials, you want the books to get looked at a little bit more about the financial arrangements in general? Is that sort of how, like, how would you phrase it?
I guess the sustainability of the of the two business models.
Of the, like, of the existing one that currently exists
new
in
one.
comparison to like the
Right.
proposed one, the
Comparison
new.
almost. We've got part of the second part of the puzzle. We have two people. We have two entities. Which one is the better business model? Which one is more sustainable? Which one has better management? Which one is superior ownership?
It's also sort of, yeah, speaking
Yeah.
to the,
That's kind of what I would just be naturally thinking. If we buy into the notion that the public should have a say, if we take the view that this is not within our purview, that this is purely a Bryant Park
Yeah.
Corporation decision, then
but yeah, I think that we're all
then that's,
generally in alignment that we should, our job is
Yeah.
to opine and we are the
Yeah.
public and this is the public forum. So I
Right.
think that it is
Right.
with our purview to opine on public things. So I
Right.
think that, and again, defer to the people who do have more of a say and
correct.
advocate that they do the things. Especially piggybacking on some of what David's concerns were about some of the financial arrangements and stuff.
Yeah.
BJ, you have raised your hand. I'm gonna call on you because we haven't heard from you tonight.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to, at the end of the day, we all know John George is not a restaurant for the masses, right? This is hot French cuisine restaurant. And minimally, even if you Google it or there's like $4 signs next to it, as well as the brunch menu, just minimally is 128. Lunch is 168 for pre. So I'm just saying I've dined there. I've been to the Tin Building. There's no meal that you're going to have less than $25, $30. That is an impossibility, but I think what we as a committee can do is maybe urge the establishment in Bryant Park to work with them to make sure there is some sort of an accessibility point. This is at a public space, right? I think we also have to recognize John George is not like the mom and pop restaurants that's off the street here. So what is it that we can do that will be able to influence to have them, if they are to open it, to have something that's going to be somewhat affordable? I don't, they're not going to be offering $10, $20 meals here. There's no prefix lunch or lunch special, and they don't even participate in restaurant week, for example, if they did that, which is like $45, $60 now. And I think the reality is John George is not, it's a Michelin-starred hot French restaurant. So what is it that we can do as a committee to try to influence them? And I think we're getting into their operations and a little bit about so I just want us to kind of caution and recognize who they are and what is it that we can do as an influence together as a committee to try to get them to offer some accessible menus and some, holiday specials, or I don't know, but I just don't know if we could actually get to the point where we're going to say some person could just walk in off the street and try to get like $25, $30 meals. That's not a reality, I think. And I don't think that's something that we want to impose upon a restaurant that has certain gravitas and influence and image as well. So all I'm saying is, what can we do as collectively, as this committee, plus whatever influences we could pull upon, whether it's Bryant Park, our local city elected, city council people that's in that district, to be able to get what we would like them to, because it's in a public space,
I don't,
without having to say to them, because it's their operations, and that's what I want to say.
Well, yeah, I think that that is where like the RFP coming in, as far as like discussing, they've made these accountability and sort of accessibility, agreements to have an accessible menu, but I think it's about being sort of creative with what, and they've agreed to come back in before us to kind of work in partnership with us, and I think with Bryant Park Corporation on that, but I think your point is right as far as like what type of experience they have with running something affordable, and sort of what past track record of that, if it's meant to be like a licensed restaurant in that John George name, if not, it's not really the same. Okay, who have I not heard from in this go round? Michael K. back.
Yeah, I got a bunch of stuff here. First of all, South Street Seaport ain't nothing like Bryant Park.
Agreed.
At any moment, there's probably 10 times more people in Bryant Park than at South Street Seaport, as you probably know. I couldn't believe it when Howard Hughes' company bought that place, and I was bringing tours down there years ago to nothing going on there, but Howard Hughes built it, and then you guys took it over, whatever. It's nuts. In Bryant Park, you had a built-in clientele. You got people gonna come, they're gonna wanna eat there, whether they're people who work in the buildings or people who are visiting, or me, who lives down the block if I can afford the menu. And I'm really worried about that, by the way, because I like the place. I love the place. The job that Michael and his art group have done been fantastic. My daughter and my kids, we like going there, and that's a great job. But
It's addressed to me, yeah.
I just want to put my sitter here so I could see.
I liked him facing me when he said that.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, but our job as a community board, we don't make the rule. We don't say, you can't have that restaurant. The library can say that maybe, or he can say that maybe, or the Parks Department can say that maybe. All we can do is write a letter to who? Are we writing the letter to?
We're writing our letter to the Parks Commissioner.
The Parks Commissioner, and saying this is what our thoughts as a community about this transition from ARC to Seaport. Thank you. And you might think about putting that name together with this, with the connotations but that's your deal. Also, I cannot see Bryant Park accepting less monthly rent than what they're getting now. Well, I can't see how they signed a lease accepting less money than before. So maybe we can get that explained by Mr. Biederman, like to. Why, if that's happening at all, which I doubt that it's happening. So anyway, so we don't make the decision. We just write the letter. Good job. Okay, got it all, done.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Tom, and then I'm gonna have a little bit of a roundup really quick. Okay, Tom.
So. Feedback now from what was said before. You know, I get that generally we say things like, I recommend the reservations, but I would have a problem with that here. Not saying I would not recommend. I'm just saying we presented questions. We sat through and I got to comments, and just as an example, I said, wait, I didn't know the length of the lease. And I got 4 answers. And I'm not saying that, you know, hey, it's different and stuff like that, but I don't feel any of the questions we got were answered. You know, if this was a college course, if I was saying, what's my opinion? You called me back, I'd say, look, it's incomplete. I had a set of questions for my recommendation, yes or no. And you talked about what color the sky was. I don't feel any of us feel, I feel there's some frustration, which doesn't have to be in a resolution, but I don't feel any of us feel like the answers were questioned, or we're at a point where we can say yes or no. Like I would say in a letter or recommendation, we would say, look, I just don't know enough about this. Just like you would say if someone asked for a recommendation for someone that used to work with you, and you say, I don't know that person. I can't, I don't feel comfortable saying yes or no. And I think if we're gonna write a resolution on it, like, you know, I did like the concept, the thought of, hey, maybe some public advocate or some sort of public review of the RFP process for at least some public park. That's more than acceptable. There should be some sort of public review, but we sat through it. Well, but we didn't do it, so we can recommend it to us. I would, right now, personally, there's no way we could recommend it. I wouldn't say we can't. We can't say, oh, no, either. I would say, hey, you came to us, we had questions, and we still have the same questions. So if you're looking for our approval, we can't give that, but we're also not saying no. We're just saying, at this point, our recommendation would be to open up the RFP process to some sort of public review, so we can better understand what's happening with the land. That's the resolution, is just before any, we can give a non-complete, it's not like a, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we sort of
The
addressed that
recommendation.
in our prior meeting. I'm not sure if you were here for that.
It might have
but
been
I think that,
Vegas,
I think
yeah.
that you'd missed that.
You would have remembered.
Yeah, we all, so it's seared in everyone's memory, especially I'm sure, Dan's memory too. Okay, so I want to clear up a couple of questions. I do have a question that our wonderful members of the public had brought up some questions too, and I want to, just for our further discussion, I want to give Dan the opportunity to set some clarification. I do have a question, if you want to answer that, on the E-Verify program and sort of that. And then I wanted to give Dan the opportunity to just very, very briefly address any points of clarification on just sort of like the facts of the matter for our continued conversation. And then one of my questions for you is also, hypothetically, were we to pick this down a month, which has been raised, how would that impact your decision process if we were unable to come to a conclusion tonight and we wanted to gather more information as has been raised? Before we say like our way in with our final opinion. Would that be like damaging to your process
Yes,
for
but
final decision?
the answer to whether that can happen is up to the Parks Department.
Okay, about whether or not the,
Community board can have another month.
okay. Okay, will you answer the E-Verify and then you can have your points of clarification? Thank you so much.
What's the question?
About the E-Verify program and continuing to use that.
We have used E-Verify up to this point. It's, depending on who you ask, it's either considered an industry best practice for hiring, or in certain instances, there are other connotations around it that I can't remember his name, when NPR explained. And so I don't have a specific opinion on it. It did not have a material effect on our ability to onboard employees. I can tell you that.
Can you elaborate on that?
We-
It was,
we
the
didn't-
reporting around that was that
Any
the
of the employees
building had
who
to
were
close.
not onboarded, I can tell you the majority were not onboarded because they either didn't show up or they didn't have inadequate documentation. It was not specific to E-Verify.
Okay, but it was the program that was being used.
We did
is
use
E-Verify.
But the way E-Verify works is that you submit the information and then it spits out a resolution. The majority of the people who were not able to onboard did not either get to that place or did not run into that issue. The majority of the people who did not onboard didn't get to that place
Of submitting.
of going through the E-Verify process.
Because they didn't have documentation to submit. That was what the reporting around
In
that.
certain instances, they either didn't show up or they didn't have adequate documentation that would pass a visual inspection, let alone go through an E-Verify process.
Okay, because I know that just the reporting was that the whole building had to close for a little bit there.
That's wrong.
Okay. So it was not closed for the day.
It's open right now.
Well, I know that it reopened, but there was like the day that it happened, the reporting around that, if I'm
The
recalling that
onboarding
article.
process was a week-long process.
Okay, there was just a day that it said that there was a sign on the door that it was closed.
I have to go back and look at the article to see specifically what you're referencing.
Okay, and,
Point of clarity, just,
yes, I'm just gonna let Dan go first and then,
it's directly to the E-Verify. I just want to make sure I understand this correctly.
okay.
So you're saying the majority didn't pass E-Verify Or they wouldn't have passed an I-9?
No, I'm saying the majority of the people who were unable to verify, it was not a result of the process of E-Verify.
So people were rejected from E-Verify, then were rejected from a HR person manually doing an I-9?
No, I'm saying of the number of people that we were unable to onboard, the majority of those people did not make it to the E-Verify process. They either did not show up to be onboarded, or their documentation was inadequate to even submit to the E-Verify.
Like, not exactly, E-Verify has a different standard for documentation than an I-9. So certain things you can't submit for E-Verify that you can legally submit for an
You
I-9.
can legally submit, yeah, I've
Like,
had a lot of
New
experience.
York City
Or a student ID if you're hiring.
As long as there's a picture ID,
A photo ID of people in high school is something that is an acceptable form of photo ID.
but it's not verified, it's not.
But it's not something that would be an E-Verify. I don't know, I'm not familiar with the program, but that would
It's
not
a
be
little
something.
different.
But a high school student could, I know personally is allowed to do that, but you're also unable as the employer to say what forms are acceptable.
Can I address
but-
one comment that I don't have some specific to believe?
Not right now, sorry. What, yes, exactly, okay. Dan, please,
I think the board has a number of sophisticated people in the financial world, so I'd like to start with this comment. The market capitalization of Seaport Entertainment Group today is $328 million. The market cap of Park Restaurants is 48. So all these comments about this is an uncertain entity and the like, people like David, who seem to be financially sophisticated, know that analysts would have an entirely different view. The company is much bigger than ARC and much more financially secure. Michael took refuge in his position as a member of the public, which I think is very inappropriate in the landlord-tenant dispute, to do what he often does, which is play fast and loose with the facts, as usual. The extension offer, which he labeled disgusting, was exactly the offer he had asked me this fall. He said, he turned down August. He said October 15th. We came back to him with October 15th for the benefit of his employees. And we said, but of course, you'll give us a release. You won't sue us. Nobody would make a deal without a release against litigation. And he said, oh, no conditions. We'll take the extension and no conditions. That's not disgusting.
just, Dan, specific, just to the facts.
That's specific then to the facts. We did not ever say that the Parks Department would rubber stamp this decision. It was not a mystery that John George was likely to get it. It was in Cranes, the New York Times, and elsewhere. So that's a joke. As to less rent, the last thing Community Board 5 wants anybody to do, and this is a common mistake of the city of New York, is take the highest rent offer. And the rent we collect, believe me, there were board members who said, we don't want to go backwards. We want to make sure we get at least as much rent as we're getting now. We will not take less rent, but we take the high rent offer, because frequent mistake by the city is take just the highest offer. They won't be criticized. Often not the best restaurant operating company, which I would submit is true in this case. The Bryant Park Grill is not cheap. Michael has never claimed it's cheap. And we do not believe John George will be much more expensive. And then there's also an issue, this is an 18-year lease. There are serious issues with succession. And we haven't chosen to raise those before, but since Michael's decided to twist the whole thing around, there are succession issues with an extension for ARC that we don't see with John George. So for all those good reasons, we went with the John George option, which we thought was the best.
Thank you for the clarification, Dan. I think that is an important point about, but we have also said as this committee previously that we appreciated that part of the considerations were not, it was just, we spoke here tonight about it as well, but the considerations were about the public and about the public being in a public space. And it wasn't just about the highest bidder and selling off our public spaces for parts. So it's about like sort of the user experience, which I think is an important consideration. And we really value the partnership of Bryant Park Corporation in doing so. And thank you for some of that clarification about the order of offers and sort of those pieces of it. I'm not sure how much of that, other than the market cap, which I see David Shapiro has his hand raised. But the continuing conversation around the financials, I know, John, you had some points about that too. But David.
Yeah, Dan, Enron was $60 billion market cap.
Please address your comment to the chair. We're back in business session, so it's not.
Yep.
It's not
Yeah,
comments.
market cap has very little to do with the actual financial stability of a public company. My comment was not versus ARC or anybody else. My comment was just the fact that they're losing $35 million a quarter. So I'm concerned about the financial forward-looking business here of that. This restaurant was built in 1988, I believe. Like, I don't even know why we're in the restaurant business here. I don't even think this is a public park. Like, I don't even understand why we're even arguing this. That there's retail around the park itself. Like, this has been done. There's something going on here that's unclear, but this doesn't seem like the right decision. That's all I have to say.
Okay, there was a lot at the time about, just for added commentary about the increased foot traffic of a restaurant, and there's a long history of concessions in parks, but making them viable options for the public to go to, I think, is an important thing to note. The public concessions and having the public be able to go to restaurants and parks is a lot to note. And at the time, there was a lot written about having a restaurant that faces inward to the park was a very revolutionary idea, and Dan was pretty instrumental in making that happen. And so is the art group in taking the risk on that space and moving forward. John.
Yeah. At the risk of bringing some additional controversy here, but since the issue has been raised, and I think this committee needs to understand the full story. So I'd like for Bryant Park Corporation to elaborate on what they mean by their succession issues, and to be as explicit as you possibly can. You raised the issue in this public forum. I think it's important for this committee to understand, and things will become a lot clearer if you could be more explicit.
Tom.
No,
I'm taking that in. I just want to see if there's a different point on the.
When you're explaining it, can you just put it in terms of as the RFP was answered?
Yeah.
I was saying, like, the answer should be as the RFP was answered, not commentary after, like, there was commentary after the last comment brought to Bryant Park. I would prefer it to be the technical evaluation of the RFP answer to that question. The idea would be, please answer the questions as it would be discussed upon the answer to the RFP, not like commentary. Like personal opinion, comments of negative connotation afterward.
Yeah, all of that would be out of order. But the RFP, speaking to the RFP very specifically would be in order.
I think
the RFP and how
the board, but otherwise it would,
But that's
any points of personal commentary, I would actually ask to be limited completely. But only.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
But
to
I
keep
think-
this as civil as possible.
I think some elaboration on that.
If there is
Just one term.
insight,
Yeah.
Bryant Park Corporation would like to share,
Yeah.
further insight, they'd like to
Yeah.
share about their delivery.
Because I don't think most of us even understand what that word just means. And by the way, there was a succession.
So could you ask this question again and get it answered without anything to do?
Question,
Please.
Sorry for the answer.
If there is something about that Bryant Park wants to say about the financial sustainability and future planning that went into an RFP decision. And that process, speaking purely to the RFP process and anything that was involved in the review of those materials, you are invited to speak about that.
Just briefly, the committee, it's a long lease, and the committee looked at who would be managing the restaurant years from now, and felt that Jean-Georges had a good organization and had a much more depth of management. It's not just Art. There were two other finalist contenders. We thought it was the right decision. The hard decision, it's always easy to just go on into the future. There would be less controversy. You wouldn't have Michael mouthing off at a public meeting. It wasn't the right decision. So-
Yeah, out of order, Dan. Okay. Thank you for elaborating on the RFP process and the choices about the succession plan and elaborating on that a little bit more. Catherine, did you have something, a comment?
I
to say?
would just, as a comment, add what has been inferred since the first time we met is a futuristic part of the decision-making process, that this is, we understand that this is a restaurant that's running, but the question is, as you come to an end of a lease, you're coming to the opening of new questions. And so I don't think that there's been a direct conversation about succession, but I do think that there's been very much an indirect, if you go through your notes and you look at, there's very much been an indirect conversation about how the viability of this, what's running now, is going to run in the future. That's another way of saying, what's the plan for the future? And so, I do think that we have some work to do about how we think about the future. I don't think, I don't know what we're thinking in terms of what we're going to comment on and what we're not going to comment on, but we do have to come to some agreement about what to move forward with, I think, here and now. I don't think that this is something I think we're trying to make decisions and we're sitting in places where we don't sit. We don't sit in employee relations with, these are important to point out, but they're not part of what we're to focus on if we look at our 4 points of a model. But again, I just wanted to comment that indirectly, there has been a conversation about the future of how this place will look in 10 years.
Or 18 years,
18
apparently.
years.
18 with an option for 3
Right.
additional years. John, just to follow up on that, and then I'm gonna go to Myrtle.
Yeah, so to piggyback on that, and I think it was briefly referenced in your letter, maybe, I think. Also, someone who's been in finance, a lot of times I ask myself 2 basic questions. Does someone have the willingness to do something? And does someone have the ability to?
The wherewithal.
Right? And what I'm hearing here is the second question was part of the RFP process.
Was the like renewing for the future and the sort of innovation of a new.
The ability to. Yeah.
Annie,
Yeah, I
do you
think
wanna?
Bryant Park believes that as pursuant to the RFP process and in selection of this finalist, that they can fulfill the financial requirements.
And the
set.
future goals that they've
Correct.
read, what I've been hearing.
What is unclear to us is maybe how, given the current
Given the
state,
current, yeah.
but
And that,
those who gave them this position believe that they can service the needs of the financial bottom lines.
yeah, that the financial bottom lines in light of additionally, like the overall holistic picture of what it brings to the park experience. And it's not just about the sole bottom line, but it's enough of the bottom line that the needs are met.
There's a
Well, it's a financial and it's a management component.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I think there's a fair concern of ours as to what are we not seeing that they did, but maybe believing there's more to come, given the success of what this institution holds and knowing that it's going to be just regardless of who comes in, being able to keep some lights on, that this can be successful. I don't know. I think that that's something that, to Catherine's point, we could place in a letter to the Parks Commissioner to say, this is something that we would keep an eye on or point out as a point of clarification that we don't yet.
Please investigate,
Yeah.
or please like give this further review and weigh in. I think we don't have clarification on whether or not, like the parks, I think that we think this is our second opportunity that we're weighing in, though really it's the first time that we're hearing like formally and
Officially,
publicly announced. Thank you for breaking news at our meeting. But that,
And I am trying to get clarification if we've been formally noticed so that our clock starts.
as far as, when so we might be
I
able
don't
to,
actually-
Okay.
I emailed Marissa, but it's
Gotcha.
9 o'clock at night.
yeah,
I'm not-
so we're trying to figure out what our
Okay.
the procedural pieces of this have been a little bit cloudy,
'Cause I just-
throughout the process.
My sense is just that a letter tonight might look a little different than a letter in a month if we asked a few
Agreed.
more direct questions about just some very specific things, and that, but we also don't want to slow down the process or put a wrench in things, et cetera. So it's just, I think that my sense from listening to all of you is that if we had a little bit more precision on a few things, it might be helpful. So I don't know what the committee thinks we should do.
I mean, I do think that moving forward as far as like being able to give an opinion with what we do know, like the goal, like speaking to the goal of this body and like what we exist to do, we exist to give opinions. That is, we are a glorified focus group, has been jokingly referred to as our point, but our real genuine opinions to weigh in on the values of this committee and the values of this district and what should be in public spaces and how the public should be included in those spaces and what sort of concepts and ideas we want the Parks Department to value in this concession as we go forward in this future thinking and this innovation, what elements of sustainability and innovation we can bring to that, and sort of the values of what this space brings and what has been there so far and what do we mean when we say affordable, and what from that. But so that is sort of our role here, is to weigh into the Parks Department. But yeah, do you want to?
I guess I was just gonna say, thinking about it, it's sort of like, I think given the information we have, we can probably refine and revise our letter, add some focus to some of our concerns and to provide it to them with the idea that we could send another letter in a month that's like, it says, we don't have these problems anymore. And I mean, I don't really know that there's that much else for us to really say or talk about right now, unless.
I do think we have the
Yeah.
same, what I'm hearing from everyone is that we have the same concerns that we had before about the accessibility. I think that we're hearing increasing concerns about some of the financials and not really understanding some of those financial relationships and wanting a little bit more clarity on that. As far as that goes in space, yeah.
I also wanna add to the letter, to the extent that we're writing one, that we should have been brought in earlier in
Right,
the
that was
RFP
like
process. We said that
Just
the last time
reiterating
around as
it, yeah.
well.
I'm sorry if I missed that.
Well, I think we're just appending our letter. I don't think we're changing any of the things that were already
Right.
in our letter. This is
Okay.
just an appendix where we might.
So going back to what David
Repeat
was
ourselves
also
a little bit
saying, you
additionally.
know, I mean, back when Bryant Park Grill opened, not a lot of restaurants in the area, whatever. Now the area is chock-a-block with restaurants. Maybe we could be doing something else with the space and they could still be making money off of it.
Well, but a can of worms.
I'm just saying, you know, it's a.
Guys, they make more money. They make 3 times more money on the ice skating than they do on the restaurant.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go. So,
Wait a minute, I'm gonna.
In your water slide.
I'm gonna say this again.
Okay.
This is a public park space that runs in the green. And these people, this is
there are other
not,
ways for it to run in the green.
but there's all these other parks that cannot do this, right? In our.
This is
in
in
our-
Midtown.
And
This is
then-
in
There are a lot of
Midtown.
restaurants
Well,
around.
my,
Okay. If everyone could, bring
My
it
point
back
is
in. We had
this.
our fun.
We
Bring it
didn't
back to
ask-
address comments to
What my
share.
point is this, I wanna respect the fact that the people who are sitting at the table with what they've come forward with have been at this for 3 decades. I want to respect the context of what is here, that we don't get to, in an hour or 58 minutes, come up with another strategic plan for Bryant Park. If you want to do that, you go over and sit on the, but we do have an opportunity in a window. And for what it's worth, we need to stick very close to what it is we can say that they may not be hearing. That may be an opportunity, like, for, there's been a lot said here. So I just don't want us to.
So we can talk about the menu, but we can't talk about the bigger decision.
Okay.
Oh,
To the chair.
The chair, I'm not
Please,
saying
please
that, I'm not
recognize
saying, I am not saying, we don't have to talk about the menu, because what I'm saying to you is that there are choices in Bryant Park. You can get a hot dog, you don't have to go. It's up to you if you want to walk inside a restaurant, that's up to you. So what I'm saying to you is that this model has been a working model for 3 decades. And I respect the context. I respect the people at the table who have already put time, not 59 minutes, but a year, a significant amount of time. So maybe they have missed the opportunity to tell us more. Maybe we should ask more, but we shouldn't cloud ourselves in this moment. We should take the window that we have and use it wisely.
Okay, Catherine, what I think I'm hearing from you too, that I really appreciate from what you're saying, is that yes, but I think we all can agree that we very much respect what Dan has done.
You all can agree to what?
Right, we all agree that Dan has done a phenomenal job with Bryant Park Corporation and turning Bryant Park into what it is. Like, that was
But
very
it's
much
not-
this
Go ahead.
guys, decorum, order, please. That we really really respect that and that contribution, and that, like, in general, I think Myrtle is thinking even bigger picture here. And I'll let you follow up in just a second, but I do just want to say that, to Catherine, to your point, this is, as we guide our sort of like opinion forming process, I do think that, it is a public concession, a public park, and that, like, that affordability model is something that the corporation has emphasized, and that's part of why it works as being in that park. It's not just a private restaurant. it needs to be a place that people who use a public park can go, and Bryant Park the grill isn't necessarily like affordable by like what term, like how is that definable? But I think that there is some agreement vaguely now that this is something that if you order really like prudently, you are able to enjoy a meal there, and that is an asset to have in a public space. So I think that is something that is important to us. I think that we've reiterated that that's important. I think that is something that it's probably one of our highest sort of priorities. I think that our letter, as far as like what our purpose here to do is to say and go on record of what this committee values in a public space and in a public restaurant in that public space. And their questions of, can you please look into these financials a little bit more? This feels a little bit wonky to us. We haven't had a lot of time to look at it. It feels kind of weird. We do appreciate it's not the full bottom line that you're looking at. It's the holistic picture of the park. It's not even where the profit model comes from. Primarily, it's the ice skating, which we really appreciate now that there won't be a fire burning down half the tent. We really want the full holistic picture of this to really be there. And we really value that Bryant Park has taken that into consideration, and that it has been a really big priority to keep the restaurant as affordable as possible. And I think that Dan has done a phenomenal job with really advocating for that, with the operator, with Seaport, and then with John George to come up with a consideration. I think that we can say that we do have concerns that they've not done this model previously, that it is a fine dining restaurant. I've heard that. But to BJ's point, that the fine dining isn't necessarily, they're saying that it's not a white tablecloth restaurant, that it's not going to be a hot dog. And I don't know that we want it to be a hot dog, that we trust Dan in sort of what that balance should be. I think that we can reiterate that the 2 different models of restaurants from profits, we've got more questions about that, and hope Parks looks into that a little bit more. And as far as the accessibility and like not closing all the time goes, I think it's reiterating a lot of that, but sort of those are some of the top line points of that balance between like where these financials. And then I would like to say something about, like, just personally, I do have a question about that E-Verify process and sort of with some of the broader like umbrella things that are happening in that political landscape, and sort of policy decisions that are outside the city, I think that that is something to kind of like look into as a public policy thing. Like we are not talking about, you're not deciding immigration policy for New York City in this committee. But I do think that some of the operational elements might be worth just
Right.
saying that this was raised. Can you look into it a little bit further?
That is not discriminatory in any which way, and then there are privacy issues that have been raised that need to be looked into.
Yeah.
And my apologies if I left out the part about the earlier in the process thing. the original.
Yeah, I
Just wanna
think
make sure.
that, I think some of that did make it into the earlier in the process. I think we can reiterate the earlier in the process piece of it.
I think we could also put in the comparable, so from what we know, this operator's only comparable would be the tin building, and
I guess ABCB was brought up as a, like a
definitely,
vegetarian sort of into the future, sort of
Definitely not
sustainability. We do
affordable.
care as a committee and as a board, we do care about a lot of like green space stuff and sustainability issues.
but I'm talking about in terms of affordability, the
Affordability,
only
yeah, the
comparable
financials, yeah.
here is tin
I
building.
just want to get it on the record that we're also talking about the green and
We
sort
also
of
know
future,
that-
sorry, just out of order.
Sorry.
So that, I think that is something a headline item to
But the
address as well.
monkey, isn't the monkey?
The Happy Monkey is also one of the affordable options.
the
That's going to
porch,
be
yeah.
the concept in the porch, and then there's gonna be sponsorships with that, which they're working with, which they've done previously in that porch space. That's going to be separate from the John George licensing agreement that Seaport will have, even though Seaport is doing a little bit of a
Jojo
This is
isn't
This is new.
Self-dealing
This is
there.
the First I'm hearing that they're different now,
it's
Pound bridges.
it's an umbrella restaurant.
Up there it is here, yeah.
Okay, so the John George has an umbrella restaurant group. There are several restaurants within that. 25% of that ownership is owned by the Seaport Company Ventures. I don't know what the corporation is. Yes. So they own 25%, but it is the Seaport that is entering into the contract with Bryant Park Corporation for the space and the operation of the restaurant. And then sort of the separate concept, it is still them, but it will be a separate concept where it's
For
the
the-
Happy Monkey
porch.
in the porch, which is gonna be its own sort of separate concept. And it's gonna be a John George, but like an accessible, not white tablecloth version, but specifically of that John George restaurant as the concept. That is the,
Not John George specifically, no. It'll,
okay, so
it
it's
will
a
be its own.
different
concept.
restaurant
It'll be
concept,
evolving, yes.
different cuisine.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, and.
and that is something that you will come back to this committee to further
we
present
will- we
on,
will, As that gets finalized.
say in like June or
further
something.
developed, we will demonstrate what that final concept is, and just for a point of clarification. We operate the Lawn Club, we operate a pop-up with Dead Rabbit on the roof. At the Seaport, we operate concessions for our concerts, those are all very different price points than a John George.
And some private membership clubs in there too.
We don't operate Shaver, but that's the
okay.
concept.
But yeah, just what's in the restaurant group's portfolio.
Yep.
Trying to get this so that it's not forever here. But so those are some things. So would you agree to come back as this develops farther and sort of be in conversation? I think that definition of what affordable is a thing. We
Just
have to give an opinion, but
We have to give an opinion, but we also need to keep in mind that they may come before Landmark, SLAP, a variety of CB5 committees, given that they're building a new restaurant. And so we ought to keep an ongoing conversation here and understand that there are different lenses. So in SLAP, we're asking the same questions about time, place, and manner of a business that's gonna be selling alcohol. It's gonna be a new
that's
business.
why, yeah, that's part of why we're not focused as much on how many days it's going to be closed to the
Right,
public or
that
not,
part.
because that's sort of
But
within that,
that's
and that's
also the
where the
menu and
affidavit. The
that's al-
menu piece of it comes more to us under affordability and not to them, because this is sort of whether or not the
So
thing
make
gets
the-
okayed to
but-
begin with as a
right.
public concession. And that is sort of like, once it is okayed, this is the time, place, and manner, and like, no, you can't move this window, or yes, you can. This is more of, are you capable of executing like a menu that is affordable in a public park in a way that makes any sense?
accessible
And
to
like,
wider.
are you gonna close and be dark and we'll have the money, but we don't care because we want a restaurant that we can go.
So we're saying
Yeah.
things like the expectation is that you're running in line with what you've told us in terms of affordability, in line with what has already existed.
With what's already existed, and that like you will come back to us like in a periodic, right, like you will appear before us in a regular way, both with some percentage of the menu being whatever affordable is, even if we're not specifically defining it or pegging it to anything, given that pricing is going to change. Do we want to say anything about, other than the financials and the financial models being different in this operational model with the ownership and licensing and succession plans? Is that something that we also want to go into further?
I think the
with Grill,
licensing
or-
fee should go in there,
Okay,
or concerns around that.
okay, and then some of maybe like David Shapiro's and John's comments around that?
Yeah, and I think I'll try and circulate something sooner before exec this time,
That
so
would-
that
that
we
would be
can more
appreciated.
broadly have like a markup. But I think we have a good consensus and understanding about what we care about. And it sort of goes back to what John said, was like, is it, and I think Catherine touched on this too, or said, maybe she had said it, but like, is it going to make the park a better place? And it seems like that's one of our reasons that the concerns about financial stability is like, do we want to make sure it doesn't like open for 6 months and then just shut down for 3 years.
It's an
Or
18
the,
18
yeah,
lease,
it's 18-year lease, want to make sure that the, like, we trust Dan and all of that stuff, but we also just.
That's why I had hoped for some window of public, if there's something going wrong, that there should be some contingency plan, because this is a public space.
I believe that in
I
the
don't-
original lease, if there was a fail, this is in the original library agreement or terrace agreement.
Maybe it
I think there's something in that.
So maybe we could just reference that something similar should be.
And I think it's that then there's additional things, but Dan can probably speak to that,
I
but
would hope
probably.
they have the
some-
power to take it back.
Yeah, I think that there's, I think it would be very unlikely that it would sit dark. I don't think that's in anyone's interest, but just we can reiterate that we
Stranger
want,
things have happened, right?
we want it to be a vibrant park in line with how vibrant it has been, and that it is something that we all really appreciate. We want to make sure that people can go. And if they can make it more accessible or more affordable, but whatever it is, I just personally want to go on the record saying that, like, in line with whatever that primary culinary sort of like menu thrust is, that the affordable options will be in line with that culinary, like, whatever is the concept, that the affordable sort of like ordering options, that a certain percentage will be within that same concept, and not like, and here's a cheeseburger for you.
Yeah.
But
Can
something
I
within that.
add one point of clarification that will address a lot of what specifically Catherine's talked about, that I haven't been able to clarify since she's been speaking?
Okay, I will grant this privilege just in the interest of time, so that we.
Two things. One, we have a continuous operating covenant. So we're in default to the lease if we don't continue to operate.
Great.
So we can't
Okay.
just shut it down and not. I think hopefully that addresses Catherine's question.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you.
And two, one thing that you should ask that you haven't, and we don't need to go into it now, how much capital is being put into this? Because we would be renovating the restaurant. That's part of the closure reason, which is different than other RFPs, and it's a fair question.
That's a fair point to make, that I think we've taken for granted because we discussed it in prior meetings. I think with Dan about the like infrastructure, and I think we frequently say that in consideration with the bid taking over for the park, that it's in exchange for running the park, and part of that is that unlike a hotel where the hotel pays for things that, the restaurant group does, but Tom and then John.
No.
Okay.
Just to conclude, I just think, what Catherine said was, I agree with the concept of, look, we should trust they've spent a lot of time on this. I just think what we should reference is we would have appreciated a little bit more of a window into the decision-making and how they arrive to it, just because it is a public space. So to justify approval or denial, not that I'm saying denial, but just because like we're learning things kind of past the point, and I think there's some things that are just somewhat unresolved, and that would be what I would say, just the process itself, because Catherine was spot on, and I think John was too, that like, look, they spent a lot of time, we're not gonna get a better bid in an hour, that's not gonna happen. However, just to say like, hey, we like this deal, do you like this deal? It's like, well, what is this? And we've been throwing we just found out like certain things about the deal during discussion past the presentation. This would have been probably, I think in any letter, just said, especially future RFPs, just a little bit more collaboration, or at least understanding, or, we have concerns. we think they can all be knocked out.
Yeah,
but
it's
there's-
sort of earlier in the process and earlier sort of collaboration in that
Correct,
process
'cause-
for input and like more transparency with, the way that the Union Square folks came to us is super, super high level early on.
Cause I can see the frustration of us asking a bunch of questions. Wait, what?
Okay, Michael Southworth, you have a question
Last thing,
for your
just-
operator.
Just, because I'm gonna be.
Just going,
drafting
doing the
this.
writing.
What, do you have a rough investment number yet, or is that still
We have an
under
obligation.
under discussion?
It's been, at least, what is it, Dan, 12 million?
What am I missing here?
It's a $12 million improvement on the physical structure. Is there anything that we want to update to
It's
this
all
letter
inside.
that we haven't already touched on, that may have been in our prior resolution? Anything that we feel we want to say
Oh, there
additional,
was the
other
question
than
of
the
the
operating?
footprint.
Yeah, the footprint stuff. It sounds like the footprint there's no
Did
change.
the
from
library
what it-
raise any issues?
I don't know. I have not checked in with the library folks yet. Michael came back.
Did I hear that right? There's $12 million inside, no outside, right? Outside's gonna look the same.
I mean, we'll go through the evaluation process.
Can't hear you.
We may change certain outside elements like seating and things in.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, the structure stays.
Yeah, we're not.
12 million inside.
Oh, this is really specific, but this has been raised in other conversations around people who've been commenting on this. Would you be open to considering a white tent structure in any outdoor tenting for winter operations so that
So-
it's clear? It's clear as opposed to being white.
One of the things we're doing at the Seaport for the Winter Concert Series, it's on the rooftop down there. And we're doing a 2-story glass structure to allow us to do year-round concerts that go up seasonally. And so we're gonna evaluate the viability of that at Winter Park to replace the existing tent structure adjacent to the trail.
Okay.
With regard to the question you just raised, the library had a person on the decision committee who was strongly in favor of the Jean George bid.
That's good to know.
His name is Richard Levy.
Oh,
He
yeah,
represents the library.
Okay, Richard Levy strongly in favor of the John George
How
bid.
do we know Richard?
He's the library representative to the Bryan.
Is there
Park.
I'm gonna check the, I wanna make
Just
sure that
one more
we
thing, I think
kind
we
of
should
know exactly
also-
like all of the points that we're making. But just so that was just raised as a sort of quality of life, sort of small detail as far as the aesthetics. If we're on the topic of the aesthetics, that translucent structure, I think was helpful for the experience of being in a park. It's not a private thing. Annie?
No, sorry, I was agreeing with you and nodding. I don't.
Should we also include that the new operators have offers to interview all existing employees? Is that something that should be on the letter or not relevant?
I don't know if it's relevant to
No.
our.
I don't know. Yeah, that's where, how, do people feel strongly about, sort of the end of the lease with Bryant Park Grill and Arc? And commenting beyond what we've already commented about that. We've already weighed in. This is going to be a letter that's sort of like a PS, like addendum, like here's our second letter updating. We're not changing what we've already said. We're just saying more. We're just gonna keep
I think we
talking.
covered a little bit.
So it's still May 1st. There's no extension.
I believe the,
Refused. So there's no extension. May 1st, they take over,
I think that they wanted to take possession August 1st. Dan, can you clarify when they would take possession?
It's April 30, and one of the reasons for the extension was offered is they've not been able to get full access to the kitchen. And they'd like to have full access to the kitchen, and while Park's there, they haven't been offered that, so they will use May and June and July and August to analyze what's there. And
Okay, but so it'll be like May 1st would be when
we have the keys.
then when you have the
Close.
keys. So there's a little bit of an interim and then it'll be a closure process beyond that of, can we just get a number for
8 to 10 months.
my vice chair who'll be writing this letter? 8 to 10 months, but do we have a general sense of it? So that adds up to the 12-ish months, like it's gonna be a little bit longer than originally
Matt, what-
discussed?
This is evolving, but
So it's an evolving plan, and obviously we have to design everything and make sure we get all the approvals right, but the intention currently is to take control, or take the keys August 1st and start construction. We would open the porch 2 months later, so call it October 1st. And then the grill and cafe, we would open probably May, is the hope.
Okay, so that's,
Yeah, we wanna.
That would be open for summer, but that would be about a year. But so that, just to clarify on the opening, there was some discussion. I know this is all evolving, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot here. That the porch might be open for this summer, but now I'm hearing that it'd be open sooner, but maybe like just the fall piece of it, or.
John,
Yeah,
we're
as
just
of
discussing.
now, we're expected to take it over, all of it over August 1st.
Okay, when do you think that you would be doing your, sort of like walkthroughs and evaluations, and is that, how much is Bryant Park gonna be? I'm just thinking of when we can next talk to you or have you back, which I would love to memorialize in a letter to the Parks Commissioner about when you plan to return.
What do you think, Meg?
I mean, I can come back every month if you guys want.
Be best friends.
I mean, the reality, I say that half in jest, but half seriously, like, I'm happy to keep you guys updated along the way, if that's helpful.
That would, I think that might be helpful for everyone to make sure. I think that we are broadly really aligned with Dan and Bryant Park on sort of a lot of the questions they raised as far as what the experience of the restaurant is, of being a park restaurant and being inside of a park in this larger ecosystem of, again, public space that you have managed wonderfully. I think we are all very appreciative of that, and want to make sure that will once again go on record as that. But if there's anything else that people want to say about like the interviewing of the employees or not, or do you think that we've really sort of addressed that in our previous letter?
I do. I also don't know how much that is relevant to our committee
And the decision that's already sort of
made
yeah
out of our hands.
within it. Yeah, I think that the operational piece and the financial piece of it. Anyone who has not spoken up yet online, is there any additional comments from that? I know that there's been some thoughts about the affordability from members online.
And we have new business.
Yeah, can you?
Here, there's a tour I should go on. Is there anyone online? Isabel, BJ, David Shapiro, Todd, Charles? Anything, you good? Okay, so everyone's pretty good with that summary? Generally, and do we have to, I don't think. I don't think that we have to say approve, deny. I think we can just say, here are our thoughts.
Yeah.
And we're just
Yeah,
updating, I think we're just
Yes.
updating our thoughts, and then at the vote, they will approve the letter of, here are
Our thoughts.
updated discussions of, we continue to want it to be affordable, we will continue to do
Opinions,
that.
not facts.
Opinions, not facts. We only deal in opinions here.
So why is this going to exec? I'm confused.
It goes to exec, at our next executive meeting, which is
Oh, we
before,
approved it. We'll approve it
13th.
here. It's just that we have to have the final word in.
before the, like,
exec.
48 hours before exec. So if you could get this
Right.
before
So the point is. for me- yeah,
Thursday,
for me to
Friday,
do
that would
it,
be great. So then we can review this weekend,
do it.
and I can
Get it
go.
to you guys this, yeah.
So that we'll have a
This
full
week, so
week
you-
for
so you
additional
guys can
comments.
read it over the weekend.
And if everyone
Our
has.
next
a chance
meeting
to
is on the
comment.
3rd of March.
Yes, but before that, our, the executive meeting is before that. We need to do all of this before that. But broadly, I think we have nice things to say about Bryant Park, but we just have some additional concerns. It's one of our typical. Here's some thoughts we have. Please think about these things. Our values are, we want it to be affordable, accessible, et cetera, et cetera.
Can we do this one by hand? Do you need to move someone?
Do this one by here.
Motion to.
Motion to send an updated letter, to send a PS letter.
Seconded.
To send an additional letter to Sue, and then, and within that we will have people, representatives from John George come back, and potentially Dan, if you want to come back, and I'm sure we'll be in many conversations about this in general. We really, really appreciate your time and appreciate your partnership,
No problem.
and everything that you've done, on this and keeping everything safe. Great, cool. Let's take this to a vote.
John? Yeah. Catherine?
Yes.
Libby?
Yes.
Michael Kavak?
Yes.
Isabel?
Yes.
Charles?
No, Charles is here.
Charles?
Maybe you went to the bathroom.
I don't see his block.
Come back, yeah, return.
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Me? BJ?
She's right there.
Yes.
And then,
This is our best thing.
Yes.
This is it.
yes, great.
Yeah, we have new business.
Oh, and Charles, one last time.
Okay. Motion
Motion
passes.
passes
Broadly.
11. With one either absent or.
Okay, moving the committee into, members of, and if there's any member of the public who wants to speak on something that was not covered on the agenda, this is the moment to speak. Raise your hand now and be recognized by the chair. Seeing no hands, new business from the committee. Michael Kavak.
I have new business. I have a free tour on February 5th of the garment district, the history of the garment industry in New York City and how it got to the current location, because it wasn't always there, was it? You know, about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory downtown. So it used to be downtown, but now it's here. How come? You can learn all about that by attending my free tour. If you're not happy, double your money back, guaranteed, on the 4th of February at 10:30. That is a Tuesday.
At the yellow button.
At the yellow button. And you know where that is. Rush, you're off the committee.
That's a requirement.
Right.
Right.
Chair, sorry, I have problems with the
Charles.
app. I'm a yes, sorry, I was having problems with the app on my phone. Sorry about
No,
that.
no worries, Charles. Thank you for updating us.
We got.
We got you covered. We got you counted. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time and commitment to the safety and enjoyment of our parks and public spaces in CV5. Michael will circulate that letter and we will provide lots of time for comments and see you at the next regularly scheduled full board meeting on February 13th.
Yes.
And Michael, you're gonna send me your notes, right?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, oh.
Yeah, the bar stuff.
Yeah.
Nope.
That's all right.